All right, what's happening, guys? How we doing? All right, what's happening, guys? Oh God,
How we doing?
All right, what's happening, guys? Oh God, Jesus, why didn't I mute that? I'm so bad. All right, so for those who know what I do, this is definitely a departure from the type of content I normally do. I normally focus pretty exclusively on gaming stuff, but politics is something I'm really interested in. So if it's not something you're not interested in, don't watch this. But watching this review or this debate live was super frustrating. So the goal is to just go over it and then kind of do like a broad overview of where the conversation went south and why and what could be done in the future to foster a better conversation, as well as not necessarily the tactics, but like where people are like maybe not being completely honest. So that's the goal here. So yeah, let's get into it.
After you insulted me.
What do you mean? How have I assaulted you?
Insulted me.
Okay,
Wait, how
I
did
don't
I
care
insult-
about this. This is the
I
intro.
am joined today by Destiny, famous internet personality, live streamer, and political commentator who will be arguing the pro-choice side. And we have Kristan Hawkins. She's the president of Students for Life of America, a nonprofit pro-life organization.
I don't know why this
And
doll is here.
Lila
That's so
Rose.
weird.
She's the founder and president of the pro-life organization.
I guess it's funny because it's supposed to be a
And,
2v2,
we
but this
were
is so
going to
weird. I don't know why it's
someone
here.
else on Destiny's side, but unfortunately, they backed out kind of last minute. So, Destiny, this is going to be a 2v1.
I prefer to characterize my position as pro-abortion, not pro-choice. Okay.
Very
you prefer-
honest.
Okay.
Very honest.
Okay, pro-abortion. I like that.
Thank you.
Big fan, big fan.
So I think a good jumping off point, if each of you
Listen,
would like
gaming,
to
cringe,
summarize
okay?
beyond
Politics,
just being
based.
either pro-choice or
Politics is
pro-life,
OP.
or in your case, pro-abortion or anti-abortion. What is your basic stance on abortion?
My basic stance is we try to figure out what is a person, what makes a person. Person is granted some positive, some negative rights by governments, and probably morally and ethically separate from governments, we also grant people some type of right. I don't believe that a person is a collection of cells. I don't believe that a person is just a body with a brain. I think that very specifically when we speak about a person, we speak about something that has the capacity to deploy a conscious experience.
Okay, have fun.
Because that tends to be the thing that we're usually talking about when we're figuring out if somebody's alive or dead, or whether or not somebody ought to be protected. When we say a person, when we say who is suffering, we don't say what is suffering. We're not talking about a body. We're not talking about a heartbeat. We're talking about a person having an experience. So when I try to think of abortion, I try to think of who is being harmed. I would say that before 20 to 24 weeks, that's about when the scientists say that the brain has all the parts necessary to begin communicating, to have a conscious experience, that about at that point, there is some experience there that we can speak of as a who or as a person. But prior to that, the first trimester, that really experience is not happening yet. So if you want to have an abortion, there is no who that's being harmed. There's just a what, which is whatever the body is up to that point. So generally, I'm pro-choice at first abortion up until that conscious experience has been formed, because I think that's what's worth protecting, because that's when we look to see when somebody's dead. So that's what we should look to see when somebody's alive.
So are you?
So this is pretty standard. Basically, just to rephrase, he's saying that prior to 20 to 24 weeks, in that range, that it's like the fetus is organic matter. It's not a who yet. So that's pretty clear. So like if you were to get an abortion before this time, then you're not killing anything. You're not killing a person. You're removing organic matter from your body.
Anti-abortion after 20 or 24 weeks?
Yeah, after 20 to 24 weeks.
And all abortions, anti-all abortions after 20 to 24 weeks.
With the obvious exceptions of like ectopic pregnancies or life of the mother or something like that being threatened, yeah. Yeah. Easy, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Okay.
And your positions on...
So we share a position, but Kristan, I'm sure will have her way she wants to describe it. I think that all humans have human rights.
Sure.
By nature of being a human, you are a member of the human family, and so any member of the human family, and this is actually the preamble of the Declaration on Universal Human Rights by the United Nations. So for those that think they have any authority, I don't know if you do, Destiny, they say that all members of the human family deserve to be protected and treated by the law as persons. And so if you're a member of the human family, you have human rights. And we know when you become a member of the human family, it's at the moment of fertilization. It's very clear. A single cell embryo comes into existence. And so I believe human rights for all humans, and I also want to build a society of love and justice. And the way to do that is to treat people equally under the law and to protect the most vulnerable, especially children. Children deserve more protection actually than adults because they are defenseless. And so we should actually go out of our way to do what we can to protect children and never commit homicide against them. So that's my pro-life position.
Cool.
So she said a lot of stuff. Basically, a life is a life, and life is worth protecting. That's basically it.
Yeah, I share Lila's position. I'm against the strong being able to choose whether or not the weak or the vulnerable get to live or die based on someone else's, perception of them or their convenience factor to another person. I think that's a very slippery slope, and I actually think the position you represented is a very dangerous one, because what you're saying is you have to be not only a member of our species in order to be a person with rights, the very basic right to life, but you have to be a person plus. And it's a very exclusionary class of what you're doing. You're excluding a whole group of human beings.
His
So
chat
I guess my
is
question
ruthless.
Are
Good
there
grief.
other human beings you would exclude that you don't view Destiny as persons?
So basically what she's saying is that, like, putting any parameters around what lives are worth protecting is, like, necessarily genocidal. That's a lot. I disagree, but that's what her stance is that drawing any lines around who can and cannot, or who does and who does not count as a person, essentially what you're doing is you're saying that there are people who may not be fetuses, that might be, alive and well, that may not count within this parameter, so it opens them up to being genocided. That's essentially what her argument is.
Not for this debate. No, I'm just kidding. Here's a question, actually. Let me respond to your question with a question. You guys say that humans are protected. Do you agree with that humans ought to be protected, or humans are given?
More specifically, humans have human rights. So
Yeah,
protection
okay.
can mean different things, but
Humans have human rights.
the fundamental human right is the right to not be killed.
Okay.
It's the right to be protected against the right to life. And so that's why
Is that
I don't
true,
have
the right to not be
commit homicide
killed?
against you, Destiny, or against you, Kristan,
What about
or against you,
support
Brian,
players?
And certainly not against a
Just
preborn
saying.
developing child.
Okay.
And but I have a question for you too, but I know we all have questions for each other, but I'll let you.
Sure,
let you
yeah, because I'm going to keep
go.
going on this.
Yeah.
I don't believe that you believe in that statement, that humans have a right to life. So my next question would be, I show you a human who's been dead for 10 days. The corpse is still a human. We agree, right?
I think to clarify, a right to life meaning a right to not be killed, not a right not to be killed.
It's
Meaning,
fundamentally different, abortion and end of life care. I watched one of your debates this morning when I was on the plane coming here, and I found it interesting because you kept using this end of life and argument. You fundamentally have a right not to be killed. Abortion is an active killing. It's an active dismemberment. It's actually a violent ending for another human being. So morally, that act of abortion is...
To be clear, that's not necessarily true. I know for later term abortions, like, an abortion isn't ripping the baby apart and then, like, destroying the body. It's usually just forced birth, especially if the baby can't survive outside the womb. Typically, like, earlier, yeah, it is, like, ripping it apart, but this is not necessarily true.
is much different than someone who maybe is brain dead, or we're not sure their brain activity, that's been in a hospital for 3 months. That's a much different position to take, because you're not actively killing that person. You may say we have to withdraw life support for this reason, or the doctor may say we have this reason to believe this person is brain dead, but you're not actively killing. You don't say, well,
This also isn't true. If you're pulling the plug on someone, you're killing them. Like, choosing to no longer sustain someone's life is like killing them. It's like, so at least in terms of consistency, this argument doesn't really make any sense.
well, they're going to die, so I'm going to take a gun and put it through the person's head. We would not say that. We would say we might withdraw life support and see if the person can sustain life on his or her own, but we're not going to actively dismember them in the process or violently kill them in the process. But that's exactly what abortion is. It's not just easily withdrawing life support. It's actively going into a womb where there's a developing human being that biologists tells us is a unique, whole, living human being that's never existed before and will never exist again, and it's actively killing them.
She's super morally loading this, but like, she's not really saying anything. She's just saying, I don't like abortion. Which again, that's fine. It's fine to not like it, but that's what she's saying.
Okay, I don't believe that you believe in that argument. If I were to show you that all abortions could be done by just extracting the baby and then leaving it on the table and not actively killing it, but just removing it from the mother's life support and seeing what happens, would you be okay with that?
That is actively killing
That
it.
is killing it.
Because the
How is that
because-
Yeah. So this is what I just said. Like, pulling the plug on someone is killing them. Like, you're not putting a gun to their head and saying "lay a bitch," but like you're definitely killing them. And then what he just asked is, okay, so what if I just took the baby out and left it on the table? Like, that's not actively killing it the same way that pulling the plug on someone was actively killing it. And they're opposed to it. So this is showing an inconsistency. Like, okay, obviously this active killing thing doesn't mean anything. So, like, what do you actually believe?
Actively killing any more than
Because
pulling the plug
children,
on
Destiny,
somebody.
you know this, you're a parent. Children are dependent on their parents. A newborn is dependent on his or her parent, and
Yeah.
a preborn child is dependent on his or her mother.
I understand. I'm just challenging the words we're using here, the difference between active
that's
and
fine.
passive
But
killing.
the
yeah.
dependency of a child doesn't give their parents or anyone else the right to kill that child.
Sure, I never said as much. I was just
That's
challenging
probably
the-
true.
You say as much, I think, because I think your position is if that dependent child before the arbitrary line of 20 to 24 weeks is in any way unwanted, inconvenient, just for whatever reason abortion is chosen for that child, then you are okay with a parent killing their child.
Depends on what video games the child plays. No, the only thing I'm trying to figure out right
True.
But are you okay with that? Because I think that was what you said earlier.
I don't know what. So right now I'm just trying to figure out what your position is. So
Well,
Well,
oftentimes
we're trying to figure out your position too. So
I
it's a
already
back
get
and
my
forth.
position with crystal
But
clear.
it actually
Well, it's a
wasn't
little
unclear.
unclear.
It wasn't actually clear, Destiny, because when
Okay, wait, hold on, wait,
in
just
your-
hold on, wait, hold on, just because I got cut off like 7 times and I haven't
Sorry.
responded. So just to be very clear, to give you an idea of like what I'm trying to establish right now, when I have conversations with people that are pro-life, there's a lot of dancing between words that I think deserve distinct definitions. Human, I think, is distinctly different from person. I think it's distinctly different from life. I think it's distinctly different from child. But all of these things, when we're talking pro-life, tend to just get thrown together. Like, oh, well, we should defend all human people and children are worthy of life. And a lot of these statements are almost begging the question. Obviously, anything that you would consider a child deserves rights to life, right? But that's what's in
Pro-lifers
contention.
believe human beings are persons.
Yeah.
What
This
you're
is like a
arguing is
semantic
that some human
disagreement.
beings don't deserve personhood
Sure,
rights.
but what I'm
Here they're just
Black
ironing out
history,
semantics.
Destiny, has always proved to be a very dangerous position that you're taking.
Yeah, I understand the analogies of slavery we're trying to draw here, but what I'm just trying to figure out is because
But can you respond to that? Because I think let's
Yeah.
just take it one step at a time. Because that
I
might
think fundamentally there's a difference between saying a fetus hasn't developed the cognitive parts yet to recognize it as living versus saying black people and white people are
Okay, well let's
different
address
types of things.
let's address consciousness for a minute. Because my understanding is you're saying
Okay, if you want, hold on, real quick.
okay.
If you want, we can leave to my position if you want. I still have no idea what you guys believe, but we can leave for mine if you want.
Well,
You can
I'll
go
just
for it.
Very
say it
clear. I
again.
mean, we
Any
can say
killing-
it slower for you.
Yeah.
What I heard you say is that
I don't know why she's
children
being so
should have rights
condescending.
and shouldn't be
At
killed.
this point,
We all agree.
Destiny didn't do anything to
has
justify the
right to not be
condescension.
killed.
Yeah.
Any
Well, yeah,
human
but
life
then
has
you
the right
also
to not
try
be
to draw,
killed.
when you said not be killed, you try to draw a distinction between like active and passively killing.
No, you
She
cannot.
did. She did.
We're talking about-
Because she said there was a difference between pulling the plug on grandpa versus actively
the
killing.
intentional destruction of an
Yeah.
innocent human
Destiny's
life.
chat is nuts.
Sure,
is
but
what
I was
we
saying that like
oppose.
unplugging grandpa would be kind of like unplugging a baby. You're disconnecting both from a life support thing.
No, because a baby belongs, a preborn baby belongs before development
He or
and able
she's
to
right
be
where
born
she's supposed
belongs
to be.
in his or her mother's womb.
Sure.
This
I
doesn't
understand.
matter.
That means
It's
there's
a
This doesn't
natural-
matter.
It's a natural habitat.
Sure, that's a fundamentally different thing. There's probably ways to passively kill children that we would agree is also wrong. Just because you're actively versus passively doing something,
Well,
that's
it's
not
about.
going to be.
I think intention matters too.
Yeah.
Sure, it
So,
absolutely can be.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But that's important to qualify. We can't just say like passively
Sure.
killing somebody is fundamentally different from actively.
Yeah, to be clear, this active versus passive argument, this is like an on-the-fly justification that they're trying to make up. This is not defensible.
killing somebody. Therefore, one is ascribed like moral weight and the other isn't. Because if you starve a child to death, that's passive, but that's also bad,
I think
right?
there's a few other things you have to get into and what you mean by passive or active.
Sure, I agree. That's what I'm trying to get into. But you can ask me questions if you want. I'll just I can pause.
I do have a
go
question
ahead.
about consciousness.
Yeah, go for
because
it.
my understanding is that's your big line. That if there's suddenly consciousness, then they are a person. They're not just a human, but they're also a person. And first, to clarify, you think it's okay for some humans to be the victims of homicide? You think it's okay to commit homicide against a human, just not a person?
I mean, I would take issue with homicide because that's a really loaded term. But I would say that you can end the life of human beings that no longer have the capacity to deploy consciousness. And
So
we
if
do
I'm
that.
asleep
Let me
and I'm
finish real quick.
unconscious, it's okay to kill me?
That's why I said capacity to deploy.
So this question is like a weird bait and switch where there's like two definitions of consciousness. So like we can keep interchanging them for like an optical win, where what like the version of consciousness that Destiny is using is like the ability to like understand like the world and interact with the world around you, like to be your own like rational agent. Like that's like a different type of consciousness than like, are you awake? Like these are different things.
Like conscious. I can wake you up when you're sleeping.
Like the fetus has capacity.
No, a fetus that doesn't have the necessary brain parts has
Destiny,
no capacity for consciousness.
If you give that child time, that child
Give the
innately
child time
has
implies-
capacity.
Wait, you said 20 to 24 weeks. What about children?
Hold on.
Who
Wait.
have REM
Just you
cycle
saying,
sleep
hold on.
at
Wait.
11 weeks.
Wait. Just what you said there. Give the child time implies that it's
Give
not
me time
there
to
yet.
wake up.
Do you think that a seed and a tree are the same thing?
You're making a wrong equivalency.
I'm
here.
not making a wrong
No,
equivalency.
you are,
I'm saying that a
Destiny.
seed
Because
given enough
listen,
time, a seed given enough
Destiny.
time will grow into a tree. But when you use the word, this thing will become this thing. The implication there is your intuition pumping all the rights that this thing has for saying this will become
Incorrect.
this.
Incorrect.
This is right. Basically, if she's saying that a fetus will eventually become a person, therefore it has the capacity to deploy consciousness, like not really. Right? Like kind of by definition. If it will gain that, then it probably doesn't have it yet, just definitionally.
Correct. A child in the womb, a human being, has
Yeah.
the capacity for consciousness.
No, it
They
doesn't.
might not have developed that capacity.
That means they don't
yet.
have the capacity.
Yeah. So now we're like kind of doing another bait and switch with the word capacity. Like capacity, she's using capacity to mean like given an arbitrary amount of time, this entity will be able to eventually do an arbitrary thing. Like a fetus could become a doctor. It has the capacity to become a doctor given enough time, right? And given enough circumstances. But like that's not how Destiny's using the word capacity. He's using it at this moment right now. What is this, object or entity capable of? And clearly it doesn't have the capability of deploying conscious experience before 20 to 24 weeks.
They might not have developed that
one,
capacity yet.
just one microphone at a time, please. Just let everyone
Sorry,
finish.
they
Go
might
ahead.
not have
Absolutely.
developed the capacity yet. Similarly, if someone is in a coma or unconscious, they're not actively, that capacity is not activated yet. But if you don't interrupt the life of that child, if you don't
right.
kill that child will absolutely be conscious in just develop consciousness in just a few weeks.
And that's the difference between the
So-
question you were asking me earlier when you tried to trip me up about the
I'm not trying to
life.
And again, to be clear, that's true. That's just a different type of capacity. And I think that this is something that should be ironed out where we're clearly defining these two words differently, or we're defining this word two different ways, like for optical wins.
You guys are the ones trying to
Or they generally don't understand.
trip me up. I'm just keeping. I'm trying to
We're
take notes.
trying
Figure
to
out what you're.
clarify. You have a very murky position because you said between 20 to 24 weeks, I believe a child has rights. Which one is it if you're the one making the laws?
Sure,
And who
I
gives
have
you the
a
right to make those
crystal
laws?
clear position. My position is the thing we ought to defend is the conscious experience because that's the thing we look
When
to.
does that conscious experience begin?
About
here?
20 to 24 weeks.
You don't
Well,
have
that's a
any-
big time period because there's been children who've been born at 21 weeks and 5 days. So were those children, when they were born prematurely, so I had an intern a few years ago who was one of the youngest children ever to survive.
Okay.
At that age, she was 21 weeks and 6 days old.
Okay.
So she's right in between your 20 to 24 week time range.
Okay.
So when she and her twin sister were born, do you believe that the hospital, the NICU, did something wrong and giving out care and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in care to sustain her and her sister's life?
Why would I think something wrong was done there?
Well, because
Well, you don't think it's a human with consciousness necessarily.
Yeah,
So
you're
I
you're
don't
not
think
sure.
a
Your argument's
2-week-old
trying
is
to
a
kill
human
them.
with consciousness, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with supporting it.
But you're saying it's okay to kill it.
So you're saying my vagina.
him.
So here, the like disagreement that's going on is they think, or what they're trying to posit, is that if it's before the range that like Destiny gave, you're like morally obligated to kill it. Obviously, that's not true. What Destiny's saying is like you don't have to do anything. It's just prior to this cutoff. Who cares?
Is magical. So something happens.
No, first of all, as a
and-
child born by C-section, I'm very offended. Okay,
But
we're
I mean,
humans too.
that's a
Number one,
position you're
no,
taking.
hold on.
Is it
hold on.
something-
Wait,
something magical
hold on.
happens during birth?
The vagina magic guy is not in the room right now. I
Well,
didn't give
you
any
were talking about that
qualification
earlier.
about birth being the magical time that made somebody a human. I've never said that ever. So I have no idea what position you're attacking there. To back up, very
I'm attacking
clearly,
your position that's not clear because
My
you said
position is-
20 to
let me say-
24 weeks, and I'm asking you a very direct question
Yeah.
about child born at 21
Your question was
weeks
if a child
and
is
6
prematurely born
days.
at 16 weeks, the mother and the father have every right to try to find support for that child. Why would you not?
But
Exactly, yeah, that's what I was saying
why?
earlier.
What makes that
Why? Because
child
it's going to grow
worthy
into their kid. Why would they not?
of care?
But you're saying it's okay to kill the kid at 16 weeks.
Sure.
And I think that's the difference between this side of the table and that side of the table. is
Well,
that side of the
obviously,
table is
that's because
okay.
I'm pro-choice and you guys are
right, but you're pro, as you
pro-abortion
said,
and you're anti-abortion.
pro-abortion. Yeah.
Have you ever considered that you could be wrong on this issue?
Yeah, of course.
What?
Have you?
What? Absolutely.
Hold on. Only one, to be clear, only one
Absolutely
side of the
I
table here is tied to organizations that are getting money invested in them and have. So
Well,
if
we
any
start-
side here was
I
gonna,
started my
I
organization,
understand, but
so-
you're never changing your position. I'm still free to change mine. So in terms of
Yeah.
asking me if I consider
That's
I'm
why I'm
wrong,
asking
I
you.
can consider that I'm wrong. You guys will never change your opinion on this. but go ahead.
I've considered it. I've had
Okay.
to consider a lot of
Sure.
things. But what would it mean if you were wrong on your position on abortion?
This argument is so stupid because you can't live your life like this. Because essentially what she's saying is, or what she's implying is that even if what you believe is correct, there's a chance that it's wrong. Are you okay with whatever consequences come from the chance that it's wrong? And again, that's just, you can't make decisions like that. Because we can think of a whole bunch of situations where, okay, well, you've been dating your girlfriend for 10 years and it's like, well, what if she ever cheats on you? It's like, oh, well, I guess there's a possibility. So if I could marry her and like start a family with her, but if she has the capacity to ever cheat on me ever in my entire life, then like this marriage thing is just wrong. I should just break up with her, and that's like, you can't make decisions like that with the understanding that like there are certain like probabilities of certain things happening, which Destiny is going to get into. But if there's a reasonable chance, if you think that like there's a reasonable possibility that what you're saying is right, the what if I'm wrong doesn't matter, right? Like, you can't base your decisions based on like, well, what if what I believe isn't true? It's like, well, you just change your mind, right?
What would it mean
Morally,
if
what
I
would it
was
mean?
wrong?
So I don't know if you believe in God or heaven or whatever.
Well, I haven't aborted any kids yet,
But
so
say
to my knowledge.
you get hit by a bus
Uh-huh.
and you go to heaven, and God's like, Destiny, you've been completely wrong on abortion your entire life. You've advocated for abortions between 20 and 24 weeks. No one can really tell because you wouldn't give us a definitive time.
Hold on. You're
Yeah,
Like-
guess what? What he says? Unlucky. So I guess I'm pro-choice now, or I'm pro-life now.
hold on, wait.
Can you
I'm sorry, I gotta address this real
consider,
quick.
like,
I gotta
what would that
wait.
mean
I gotta,
if you were wrong on
okay,
abortion?
hold on. For you saying that just because I can't nail an exact solid time when
That's kind of a big deal.
It's not really that big of a
It
deal.
is a big deal.
It's a
'cause
big deal when
there's
you're
a
making
line
laws.
between
It's
there's a
super
line
not a big
between
deal.
homicide
You could
and
literally
then it
just
being
say
totally
like,
okay.
hey, before 20 weeks, abortion is okay, and then draw the cutoff right there if you want.
Yeah,
That's
this
the
would be
question
like a
for
good
policymakers.
law to pass.
But-
And I think
but
most
why do
places that have
policymakers-
abortion
why
laws,
does
that's like the
anyone
cutoff
Get
they
to
usually
decide
use.
use.
whether or not
Men
an
decide that.
innocent person lives or dies.
Because that's what policymakers do.
No, they
Whoa,
don't have
what
the
was
right
that?
to kill an innocent
Scream
person.
shit.
If any policymaker tries
if
to
you're
kill an
making
innocent person,
decisions about
that's
healthcare
murder.
and triage and who gets
There's a-
medical treatment first, or if you're making decisions about
Destiny,
saving
can't
people
you
from
admit there's a- okay,
hold on,
can't-
wait, okay.
I still
I'm gonna,
wanna-
wait, just be clear. I'm gonna
I
start
still
kind of
need
go,
to know if you've ever
I
considered
know, but I don't have a
that.
chance to answer any question, and you're like loading so many horribly like intuition pump question banks in front of me that I don't have time to answer all of the horrible questions in front of me. Okay,
I
so
just
like,
wanna know
wait, no, I'm gonna
considered
keep talking.
wrong.
We're gonna do one at a time. I will answer a question, but you can't keep stacking like dumb questions in front of me and then be like, oh, see, like you want to murder children, okay?
I don't
If
know
you wanna-
about
if
dumb
I can- if you want me to
dumb
answer, hold on.
questions.
So let me address the very first thing because you keep trying to draw like there's some like thing here that you've caught me on. The idea that I can't give you a concrete time between 20 to 24 weeks, okay?
Yeah.
I hate to be the guy that does this in a debate, but there's something called a continuum fallacy or a nirvana fallacy. The idea that just because I can't point exactly at when something begins, that I have to say that all of it is the same or I can't point to that thing existing at all. I can't tell you when individual pieces of sand are stacked up and eventually become a pile of sand. I can't give you the exact numbers of sand that I can see for that to be, but there is a difference between an individual piece of sand and a pile
It's
of
a
sand.
false equivalency,
hold on,
Destiny.
wait.
So what they're trying to like attack him is that because you can't pick the exact moment it becomes conscious. So it's all arbitrary. And like this is another like bait and switch where we're using arbitrary like two different ways. Like in one end, you can say that, you know, at any time between 20 and 24 weeks, like, you know, just for the sake of argument, you know, just within that range, that's when it becomes conscious. Like that's like kind of arbitrary in that it's not clear, but I just had a stroke. Legislatively, it's actually super clear. You just at 20 weeks. Because like, why would you set it any later than 20 weeks and then like end up, you know, killing potentially conscious people, right? Like, this is like a weird like semantic attack that they're doing here.
It is.
Hold on.
It
It's-
is.
It's hold on.
That's-
This is
If you're
basic
gonna-
argumentation.
Because the reality is you are saying that these are persons
Yep.
and
Yep.
these aren't based on a specific characteristic that you've decided on. You came up with it. It's not human rights
I
anymore.
didn't-
It's consciousness rights.
Yes.
You believe
because
in not
that,
human
no.
rights.
To be
You're
clear,
not you're not in support of
nobody
human
here
rights.
at this table,
You're in
you
support
either
of consciousness rights.
Hold on.
No.
Why don't you defend?
So
wait,
you need
why
to
don't?
defend your position, and you're not doing that. You're kind of
Yeah.
blowing
told
smoke a
you.
little bit, to be honest.
Why don't
And
you
so
give the same rights to
let's-
why don't you give the same
let's-
rights to human corpses as you do to living
Because
humans?
they're dead. They
Okay,
can't, they
what
they're
is-
already
What does that
dead.
mean when you say they're dead?
So they're already dead.
What does dead mean to you?
I mean,
their
there's-
body's no
there's-
longer working in a coordinated fashion anymore. Their heart isn't pumping blood. Their
Okay.
brain is not.
If I put a
producing brain waves.
person on a table and I can keep them alive with machines.
To be clear, you could probably argue that like the decomposition process of the body, is it still working in a coordinated argument or in a coordinated fashion? You could argue that. I don't know if I would, but like I would be pretty annoyed here, so I would probably argue that here.
Machines indefinitely, but they're never going to wake up. Is that a human life that
there's
should be
there
defended?
there is a difference between withholding extraordinary
Just to be
medical
clear, I'm about
care-
to ask that same question after you, whatever you're about to say, because you're
No,
not
this
answering
is
my
important
question.
because
Okay, go ahead.
you're
This is important. This
it's a
doesn't
bit of
matter.
obfuscation the direction you're going
It's
here because
absolutely
there's a
not.
difference between withholding extraordinary medical care,
Mm-hmm.
which would be like life support, and withholding ordinary medical care. So if I, as a parent,
This is
or
a
I
weird
as
distinction to
doctor,
make.
I have a patient in the hospital, and let's say they are there being monitored because they're, they have a cancer, aggressive cancer, but they're maybe going to die, but they're not dead yet, and they're not on life support. They're just being monitored. And if I withheld food from this cancer patient and refused to bring food, and this cancer patient can eat, and refuse to feed that cancer patient, that would be homicide against that cancer patient. I don't have the right to.
You
Sure.
agree with that, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a good
Do
question.
you
Let me
agree
with
that would be homicide?
Would it be wrong to deprive
I'll say it's
food to
wrong,
a cancer
for sure,
patient?
yeah.
Who's
Okay.
going to die?
Well, legally, it would be murder to not feed
Whether
a
I'm not
patient
going to make
in
a
the
legal
hospital.
argument, but yeah, I would agree that would be wrong.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
So that's the difference between extraordinary medical measures and ordinary measures. Okay. And
Natural.
This isn't true because running the same scenario again, if you have a cancer patient who like needs medicine and you're just like, nah, I'm good because that's extraordinary care. Like that's still bad, especially if they're like asking for medicine. They're like, hello, doctor, like, can I get some type of cancer medication? And you're like, no. And that's it. Like, you can't do that. That's arguably worse.
For a
Natural
child,
Well, it's
and
probably
for a
not
child in
worse,
the
but that's
womb,
just as bad.
They deserve the ordinary measure of being able to stay in their natural habitat, their mother's womb, until they're old enough to survive outside the womb. Similarly, a newborn who you're feeding formula or you're breastfeeding has a right to that food from their mother or caretaker until they're old enough to, and even when they're old enough to physically feed themselves, they still have a right to be given a plate full of food at the dinner table. You can actually go to jail for child neglect by failing to feed your child. So, building these analogies that actually don't work with what we're actually talking about by saying, well, removing life support is like abortion, they're not the same. Because children have a right to care, and children have a right to food, and children have a right to nourishment.
I still think
just like a right
you
to
need
life.
to clarify your position, because you said 20 to 24 weeks, which I gave you a very, very real life scenario of a child who's born, a twin who is born at 21 weeks and 6 days, which in your view...
Yeah, I don't remember what he says here, but I'm sure he's going to say it's after 20 weeks, so you have to treat it like it's a person. That would be my guess. Maybe he says some crazy shit, but that would be my
could
guess.
have been aborted because you don't think she would have had the consciousness that you deem worthy of personhood.
True.
But I mean, what biologist
True.
do
Amen.
you know that tells you that consciousness is at 24 weeks?
It's a great question.
Because I researched this before. I was on the internet. I was looking at PubMed at NIH's website. There aren't biological conclusions, and in fact, they actually support the pro-life side, because you look at the pro-life.
Biologists don't make an argument about pro-life or pro-abortion.
Well, they do make arguments about when child's feel
human life
pain,
begins.
when
Sure,
twins
yeah.
interact. So there's
Yeah.
there's a very well-known study showing that twins interact in the womb as early as 14
Amoeba
weeks.
interact with each
And
other.
Pain, children can experience pain at 12 and a
Sure.
half
Germs
weeks.
react to external
So are you
stimuli.
saying-
None of this
are you saying
matters.
you don't
What she's
have
saying,
that
none of this
human
matters.
I haven't even got to. Okay, so let me make a couple things. So firstly, you said I made a false analogy earlier. You've compared abortion to cancer patients getting withheld
No,
food.
I wasn't comparing abortion to cancer patients.
Okay,
I was talking about the difference between ordinary measures.
I'm not talking
and
about
extraordinary
ordinary or
measures
extraordinary
when
care.
it comes to
That
medical
is a-
Natural
that is an entirely
progression
separate
versus
sure.
natural
That is an
end. That's what they're
entirely.
trying to
That's
conflate.
great. That's
Wait,
entirely great.
if
No,
I
I
can
was
just
only
if I
using
could
that
just
to
jump in
clarify.
really
No,
quick.
I don't need you to
No,
jump in.
If I could
No.
just jump in.
This moderator's completely worthless. I don't know what
Let
he's
me just
doing.
say, if we can allow maybe the turn the heat down a little bit on the conversation,
I
or at
like
least
the
slow
heat.
it down a little
No,
bit.
let's
We're
fine.
making people
Yeah.
at home uncomfortable.
Well, I do want to give. It does seem to be that Destiny hasn't had as
No,
much
that's fine. I'm good.
opportunity.
I'm taking
You
notes.
okay?
I'm good. I'm ready.
We needed
'Cause-
that other guest there.
No,
Right?
we
no.
absolutely don't. Let me go. Okay. You're making bad analogies by comparing any of this to ordinary or extraordinary medical care is a fundamentally separate question, okay? That's a separate
I agree.
question of provisioning resources
I
or whatever.
completely agree.
You don't agree because you brought it up as a contrary to
No,
the
I was
question that
bringing
I
it up as a
said.
response
I would
to you
originally
about-
ask you this question again, and I'm going to ask you the question again because nothing that you said addressed it. And my
True.
question was, and I'm going to repeat it, a person that is in a coma that will never wake up, should that person be indefinitely kept alive on life machines?
It depends on what are the characteristics of them in that
The
coma.
characteristic is
Was
that the
a
person's
medically
body.
induced coma?
The characteristic is the person's
was-
in a coma. They're never going to wake up, but their body
do
is
you
still.
know?
How do you know they're not going to
How
wake
do you
up?
know they're never
I mean,
gonna wake
the
up?
problem is,
Because
Destiny,
the
you're coming up
scientist has
you're
a magic
Destiny,
machine that he pushes
Destiny.
a button, and the machine says this person
Destiny,
is never
you're
going to
coming
wake
up
up.
with a magical scenario that you are designing without providing any context. Where
Just to be
context
clear, are you?
exists
So the point of this hypothetical is to illustrate, like, okay, if a life is a life, this person is alive forever if we keep them hooked to the machine, but they're never going to wake up. Should we ever be allowed to unhook them from the machine? If we are allowed to unhook them, why? Because what Destiny's trying to point out is, okay, if we are allowed to unhook them from the machine, then it sounds like the life being a life thing doesn't actually matter. What actually matters is consciousness. That's what he's trying to get at. Which I don't know if they ever address this.
No,
I don't
they
think
don't.
they
being
do.
in a coma, he's not going to wake up as a magical scenario.
No, I'm telling
No,
you that
you-
when
Okay, so
people
we agree
are
that
in a
people
coma,
are in
you're
comas
trying
and
to make it
oftentimes we can say-
Destiny.
Guys,
You're
please,
trying
one
to make it
one
up.
one
I like
microphone
it.
at a time,
No,
No, no,
please.
it's
Let
good.
me
It's good. It's
answer.
good. Because the refusal to engage with the
Let me
question
answer.
demonstrates the weakness of your position.
No,
You can keep doing this, but
Destiny.
to be clear, I'm going to ask the same question again.
I still like to
You
get
can't
my
even
question
engage-
answered.
Wait, guys,
you can't even
please,
engage with the
just no
hypothetical. There's a
interrupting.
reason
listening to
why.
what I'm saying.
I am
So
listening, but you're not.
okay.
You're refusing to engage with the hypothetical
No.
because you know that you don't have a rock solid
No,
definition of
because
what type of life
you're-
should be defended. The
because
reason why
we
you want to
did
engage
it.
with the
Guys,
question is
guys, hold on.
You're making a lot of assumptions.
Order in the podcast studio.
We-
I am noticing perhaps on.
What's his
I
guy's
don't
name?
know
Brian?
which
Brian's
is
completely worthless. I don't know what he's
the
doing.
most, but let's try to avoid interrupting. Let's allow people to speak, finish their thought, and then, if we can. So Destiny,
We
do you
can
want
do
to
a
make?
round table. One question we each answer.
Okay, to be clear, I'm willing to, and I have responded to when you asked me about feeding cancer patients, what I consider killing. I said yes. You said when you withhold food from a child, etc. I'll answer any question you give me. I have no problem.
Answer
Because my
the
position.
question, have you ever considered that you may be wrong on this issue, and if
Again,
you
this
are
is
wrong on
stupid.
this issue, what does it mean you are spending your time advocating for?
There's problems on both sides. First of all, that's not the greatest question to ask. You're getting
Well,
to very weird, like Pascal's
thank
way.
you for
I'm
your
going to finish.
passive
I don't know what this
Okay.
weird flashing
So
shit that's
just
happening on my
answer the
screen is.
question.
I am answering the question. Okay,
Oh, after you insulted me.
what do you mean? How have I insulted you?
Insulted me.
Wait, how did I insult you?
My question. You said, well, it's not the greatest question to ask.
I said it's not a
It's
good
not the
question
greatest
to ask
question.
because theoretically you run into a bunch of weird areas saying, well, what
Maybe
if
you
I'm
don't
wrong on
wanna
this particular
answer the
thing?
question.
What
Have
if
you
you're
thought
wrong
about
by
that?
saying that black people and white people do deserve the same rights?
Well,
Like, what if we're trying-
let's let Destiny answer the
Sure,
question.
yeah. So
Go
I mean,
ahead.
there's like, so I'm not going to always think of like, well, what if I'm wrong? I mean, I do consider both ends. Of
Yeah,
it.
and that's the point that I was making
The
earlier.
consequences for being wrong on both ends are pretty disastrous. On one end, you're advocating for, I guess, arguably the genocide of like of little babies,
That
and on
seems
the
pretty
other
awful.
end, sure, and on the other end, you're advocating forcing women to give birth to children that they might not want, especially in cases of, say, sexual assault or in cases where they feel like they can't
It's
support
not
for their
for-
child.
What do you
Not
think
forced
is?
birth, Destiny.
What do you think would
Abortion-
be worse? Genocide. So we had 60-some million abortions.
Yeah. So again, what she's saying is, if you're wrong, that outcome is worse than if I'm wrong. So you should adopt my petition or my position. Like that's what she's saying, and like that's stupid. You can't make decisions based on that because like you can't do anything because there is no position that you can ever take with like oh well, if I'm wrong, nothing bad happens. There's no position that you can take that's true for. So like this argument is incoherent.
In America since Roe versus Wade. 60 million. More than 1,000 children are killed every day at Planned Parenthood.
You can't. You keep saying children like you're
Yes,
morally
they are.
loading your.
They're young
Yes.
humans.
Okay.
When you
well,
saw
10,000
when you
okay,
saw the
abortions-
ultrasound of your son in the womb, did you say, "Wow, look at that fetus sucking its thumb," or did you say, "Wow, look at my boy, he smiled at me"?
Yeah, I also get warm feelings when I look at my car. Like, this isn't proving an argument
Are you
by
saying
saying
cars
like,
are
do you
the
have...
same as humans?
I'm not saying cars. I'm saying that judging the validity or the veracity of your argument by the emotional response somebody has to an ultrasound. I also felt a certain type of way when my ex-girlfriend showed me that she was pregnant. But that doesn't mean that the urine on the strip is anything special either, right?
Your emotions can match
Just
the
to be
reality.
clear, I still
and
haven't
the
gotten
re-
an answer to my coma
and the-
question,
and
which
the-
is like
I still
fundamentally
haven't
like an
gotten an answer
important...
to my question.
the reality.
What was your question?
So, do you consider you're wrong? And you said
I
well,
have
on
considered
one,
I'm wrong, but the
on
problem
one
is...
end
hold
it'd
on,
be
let me- yeah, hold on,
genocide.
Just let her finish.
On
Yeah,
one
she's
end, it
gonna
would
say the
be
same thing, yeah.
genocide, and on the other
Yeah,
extreme.
I don't know why
if
they
I
keep
were wrong,
harping on
I
this.
would
This
have
chick's so
forced women
annoying.
to carry unwanted children, or in your word, fetuses or things.
Correct.
What do you think would be worse?
Well, in order to answer
Genocide
that...
of hundreds of millions of
Innocent
children
babies, yeah.
worldwide. Do you think that would be a little worse?
The thing is,
than
in order...
inconveniencing a woman for 9 months if I were wrong?
In order to accurately answer the question, you have to assess the risk of being wrong on both ends. For instance, if I were
Yeah,
to
that's
say,
what I was saying
what
earlier.
would be worse? If I've got to choose between 50 people here or 100 people here to protect from some death event, you know, what should I choose? The 50 people or the 100 people? Well, it doesn't make sense unless I
What
have
do you
a...
mean by
let-
death event?
As in, let's say that there's going to be something that has a chance of coming in and killing both people, but I can protect one group of people. Do I want to protect the 50 or the 100?
But that's not a
I
correct-
need to finish
it's
the
not a
analogy.
correct
Hold on.
analogy.
If you can't understand any hypothetical, we can't get anywhere in this
But these
conversation.
hypotheticals
Then-
don't
no,
match what we're discussing,
The hypothetical perfectly
Destiny.
maps on. What I'm saying is I wouldn't just say that I would protect the 100 people because 100 is greater than 50. What I would say is what is the probability of the 100 people dying versus what is the probability of the 50 people dying? And then from there you would start to weight the decision accurately.
hundreds of
when
millions
you
of
ask
women
me,
haven't
so
died,
when you
and they
ask
won't
me,
die
so
from
when
being
you
pregnant.
ask me, so
Pregnant.
when you ask me, what's the probability or what is the likelihood of being wrong or what would be worse, being wrong here or being wrong
Yeah.
here? What I have to think of is what is the probability of being wrong on both ends. It's not just a 1-to-1 because I'm not going to sit here and pretend that everything is a 1-to-1 like there's an equal chance of being right or wrong here. I feel very strongly about my position about being pro-choice, so I'm not weighting this as a 50% chance of being right here and a 50% chance of being right here. So the question doesn't make sense. So I'm saying it's a meaningless question.
How do you feel?
Yeah. So another way to think about that too is like what she's saying is, oh well, if you're wrong, we genocided hundreds of millions, or what I think it was 60 million or something. We genocided 60 million babies, and it's like, sure, that's probably true, but like if you're wrong, we enslaved 60 million mothers to be like baby factories, right? Like so. It's like that's not even like these are both like catastrophic failures, so it's not really fair to say like that's why it's hard to like this is a bad argument to make because wow, these are both like really bad. Like I don't know if I'd ever like willingly choose, yeah, let's just enslave 6 million like women, that sounds fine. Like that's like that's not a good choice to make. No one willingly picks that. And it's like, well, these are both my options. Like, I'm just not going to choose, right? That's how most people would feel.
Very strongly about being pro-choice when you can't even tell us at what point you think a child has this extra special consciousness that deserves the right to life in the womb.
Why would that prohibit me
from? You don't
from?
know when consciousness exists, when it actually comes.
You won't
don't know
even say
when the baby has
I've
consciousness.
given you the range of when different people.
Yeah, this is
develop
the Nirvana
races.
fallacy.
It's about 20 to 24
So
races.
you want to create, so you believe that we should have a sliding scale of what it means to be a human person.
We already have that sliding scale. We do it at death. That's why when we go back to the, I'm going to ask again. No, I'm not answering the question until you answer this question.
Do you think it's okay to kill someone when they're unconscious?
No, because I said capacity to deploy consciousness.
What do you mean by capacity to deploy
As in
consciousness?
all of the parts in your brain are functioning and working and can deploy a conscious experience.
An embryo who is developing their brain will absolutely have the capacity to
Will implies
but
doesn't
why
yet.
are you being age discriminatory?
Yeah, again, this is, or earlier, this is the, we're using capacity in two different ways, and we're using consciousness in two different ways. Like, Destiny is saying capacity means you currently have the ability to do X. And then consciousness is the ability, is like, the conscious experience, the ability to assert oneself in the world. And then on the flip side, they're defining consciousness as, are you literally awake right now? And they're defining capacity as, given an arbitrary amount of time, will this entity be able to do X thing? So they're having two different conversations right now. And right now it's still hard to say whether it's like dishonesty or just they literally don't understand what he's saying.
Against that
Because
child
when
for
you
not
say-
having the ability to develop.
No, hold on, wait, you can't just ramble and ask me a
Destiny.
question. You ask me a question. If you're going to ask me, I'm just going to keep talking. Okay.
Okay,
When you
go.
ask me, will a thing have a right? I will agree with you that it will. The pieces for a building are not the same thing as a building itself. A seed is not the same
But the
thing as a
embryo
tree.
is a
An
whole.
embryo is not the same thing
No,
as a person.
no, you're
so when you
conflating
say,
parts
hold on,
and
don't stop
wholes.
saying that every single. Okay, hold on.
The
To be clear for
embryo
the
is
audience,
whole.
when you're
Hold on,
having a
just
conversation
let
with
him
somebody,
finish,
yeah,
let
if
him
you're having a
finish.
conversation with me and they're not willing to engage with a single hypothetical, or they claim every hypothetical doesn't map on, unless you can clearly explain why, it's because you know that the hypothetical is testing the limits of your belief in a way that demonstrates
just using
the absurdity
science.
of what you're saying.
And
You're
you
not-
don't-
so-
you don't
first
wanna
of all,
acknowledge that.
whether or not pro or
Let him
anti-life
finish
exists
and then
has
we can-
nothing to do with
yeah.
science. It's not a scientific question. It's a question of moral philosophy. Okay, number one. So number two.
This is true. What she's trying to argue is that, like, there are scientific facts that say, one, this is when life starts. That's true. Like, I think most scientists believe that life starts at conception. Two, there are things that, like, we care about that fetuses can express. I think she's cited that, or not cited, she said that they experience pain at 12 to 14 weeks, and then they can, like, interact with their siblings at 12 to 14 weeks. And what she's saying is, we care about these two things. We know that life starts at conception. Therefore, like, all of these things together is scientific proof that pro-life is the only stance. And, like, again, that's not true, because this isn't a data-driven debate. Like, while Desi's position is data-driven in that, like, he's saying if consciousness starts between 20 and 24 weeks, then, like, that's where we should make the break point. But his actual argument doesn't even care about the 20 to 24 weeks. All he's saying is that whenever a person becomes conscious, that's when, or whenever a human becomes conscious, that's when it's a person. Like, that's what he's saying. The actual data has no bearing on his argument. Unless, of course, consciousness starts at conception, then they would be in complete agreement. But for different reasons, which is important.
Two, going all the way back to this original question that I don't think you're going to answer me, because I think that this does demonstrate the faultiness of your position.
I already
is
answered you, and you
didn't
couldn't
answer.
I
No,
did
you
answer
said that's an absurd
No,
proposition
that's
to
not what I
imagine a
said,
person could be
Destiny.
in a coma.
I said you needed to provide more information. Was it a medically induced coma? How long was the coma? These questions matter.
Also, they're not answering any of his
I can
questions
ask
because they
a
don't
very
understand
simple
what he's
Was there
saying.
What's the
injuries?
question?
A
Was there-
person is in a bed. This person is unconscious in a coma. The doctor has a machine and he pushes the button and the machine says this person will never wake up again. But the rest
There's
of their
no
body
button
works.
like that exists.
That's why it's called a hypothetical.
Then it's a
hypothetical
false
means
hypothetical,
that
Destiny, because it doesn't exist in the real world.
Yeah,
You're
you-
inventing a false hypothetical that doesn't exist in the real world.
That is
So
ends
it-
in
it's-
human
it-
life dying.
Yeah, so
it's kind
and
of
you're
risky.
using
Yeah,
it
they
to
just don't understand what he's
justify
saying.
If you
ending
can't-
the life
yeah.
of an embryo.
If you can't adjust this-
or a human being.
I
So
win this
that-
debate de
that
facto.
doesn't- that
If
doesn't
you're
match.
incapable of dealing with a hypothetical, then the conversation
No,
is
we
like...
can deal with hypotheticals.
You can't. A hypothetical, by definition, is
No.
something that is not happening. That's why it's called a
Destiny.
hypothetical.
Destiny.
So wait. Let me ask you a hypothetical.
what?
Since you love hypotheticals, let me ask you.
I
a
love
hypothetical.
hypotheticals.
So
Yes.
That's great.
scientists are working.
They still haven't answered the
on
hypothetical.
artificial wombs.
Okay.
All right? Would you agree with me that if they develop this artificial womb that can sustain human life, that there would be no legal reason, or there should be no legal justification for abortion? Because if you could remove a child from a woman's womb who says doesn't want to have a child, didn't want to get pregnant, and place that child in an artificial womb where the child will safely grow and develop until he or she's ready to be born, would you agree with me then, in that hypothetical situation, that there's no justification for abortion?
No.
So, yeah, he should say no here, because she's making a bodily autonomy argument, where she's saying, look, if we could extract the fetus and have it develop outside of the body, now there's no reason to destroy the fetus. And he's saying, he should say, I don't care that there's no reason to destroy the fetus. I don't think a fetus pre-consciousness is worth protecting, period. Or not even worth protecting. If you don't want to protect a fetus pre-consciousness, then it's a morally neutral action. Like, that's what he's saying. So the bodily autonomy argument just doesn't matter here.
Why not?
You're not even. There's 10 unanswered questions back with the
I just solved all the problems, right, of my hypotheticals.
You are making a dialogue tree argument against an argument for viability. I have never made that argument in my life. I've never argued that viability is what determines if a child gets to live or die. That's an absurd position. I would never have that. So if you're saying
you were making a viability
hold on.
argument.
What?
So-
wait, no, wait, because you don't even understand the arguments you're making now. Hold on. You are making an argument for viability when you're saying, if I could show you an artificial womb,
I love when men
should we
yell at
not
me.
say? Yeah, I know, I love yelling at women. Okay, could you not say?
I can tell.
Could you not say? Thank you. Could you not say that, well, if I can show you that I can transplant this fetus from this womb at 1 week to an artificial womb,
Yeah.
doesn't that give it the right to life? The implication there being the viability of a fetus to survive outside of a natural
I
womb. than
thought we
artificial
could
womb.
find common ground
Hold
on
on,
that.
hold on. So
Yeah, the common ground. I would
That's
say
why I
that
was
has no.
asking,
There is no
Stephanie.
common ground there. I would say 20 to 24 weeks.
So
the same answer I gave
Destiny,
before.
your entire position is based on is based on age. It's basically the development, the
It's not based
maturity.
on age. It's based on
Yeah.
development of the
it's
conscious
age
change.
is
development
argument.
is age, Destiny.
It could develop
For
early
human-
or later, I guess, right?
A development is age. Age is a marker of development.
It can
okay?
be, sure.
So your whole argument is that if the development hasn't happened yet, then therefore they're not a human life worthy of protection.
Yes.
And a person, yeah.
A person,
Yes.
okay?
Correct.
So are you saying that toddlers, because they're less developed than an adolescent, should have should not have the same rights as an adolescent?
So this is a good question, because you could argue that consciousness is a gradient, and that as you age up to a certain point, your consciousness meter fills up, right? And then infants they don't really have memories until they're 3 or something. So you could argue that a being isn't fully conscious until 3 years old. But that's not really the argument that Destiny's making. He's not saying you need to be maximally conscious in order to be worth protecting. Just you need to be conscious, period. So this is a different type of question that they could get into a pretty interesting dialogue about. I'd be very surprised if they did. I don't really remember a lot of this debate. I just remember being super annoyed by it. So I don't remember how he answers.
Yes. You agree with the same
Fundamental
thing. Hold
human
on, to
rights.
be
They should
clear.
have different human
Whoa,
rights because
okay,
of
now you're qualifying
development.
more, but the funny thing
Because
is
of
you
human
said
rights.
in your opening statement, you literally said
They have the
children
same
need even
human rights,
more
right?
protect. They don't have the same rights.
Do they
A child
sta-
can't sign a contract. A child can't
But-
buy a
but
house. A
Destiny,
2-year-old
hold
can't go
for
to high
1 second.
school.
Do they have the same human rights?
No.
A toddler and an
They don't have the same
adolescent
human rights.
don't have the
Do you-
same
what-
human rights.
Do you know? Do you believe? That
I would
there are
argue
human
that I
rights?
have the human right to live in a house in the way that I want to. A 3-year-old
Okay,
does not have the
so
human
do you
right
not
to live.
agree that-
Hold on.
Okay,
no,
hold on. Do you not agree
wait,
there are
wait.
fundamental human rights? Maybe that's
There might be some.
If
If you want to get
confused.
very fundamental in terms of do you have a right to not be killed?
Yes.
Yes,
Then sure.
I think that's
hold
a
on.
very important
Sure,
point
you
to-
can say
to
that.
establish,
But earlier
for
you
sure.
stumbled onto something very funny that we all agree on: is that based on
No.
the level of development, you actually do grant different rights to people.
Well,
that is absolutely
so you're
true.
saying if you're not developed enough, you have the right to be. You actually.
Yeah,
instead of
I don't know.
child, You should be less protective as a
this
child,
debate's
and you have less rights
really
as a child
frustrating
to
to
not be
listen
killed,
to.
not be
Child
cared
is
for.
generally defined as a human person, so you're
But-
begging the
but
question when you
Destiny
ask.
believes
I
in
believe
the-
all children should
he
have rights.
believes in
I
the
just don't agree that a
magical-
3-week-old
Are you still
fetus is a
believing
child.
in the magical vagina or
More than I
vaginal
believe in the
C-section?
magical zygote that
Because
becomes a
what
magical
about- so
human
what
when it's
about
2
the-
cells big.
What
Yeah, of
about
course.
the intern I mentioned,
hold-
the 21-week, 6-day intern?
What about it?
So when she was born, she and
This
her
question
twin
is stupid.
sister were born.
I don't know why she
Under
keeps asking
20,
it.
24 weeks. Who knows what Destiny really believes about abortion at that point?
I told you between 20 and 24 weeks, yeah.
You got to be kind of specific when you're talking
Do you
about
think that
killing
puberty
people.
exists?
But
Wait. Do you
what
think puberty? Wait. I need to know. Do you think puberty?
answer my question,
Okay.
Destiny. Remember?
I'm going to ask you this again. I'm
Yes,
coming
I
back to the
believe in
coma one too,
biology.
because you
We
still
can
haven't
come back to
answered
the coma all day
my.
long.
You still haven't answered the coma
Right.
question. But
It's a false.
But what is the answer? So
The
at
answer is if you
at
want to take care of a
21
baby.
Excuse me.
You're
At-
excused. Go ahead.
At 21 weeks and 6 days,
Yeah.
a child is born,
Uh-huh.
and a child is surviving.
A thing
But
is,
the ch-
yeah, okay.
Is it a thing or is it a child?
Something, yeah, it must be something.
Do I have the right after the moments that child
Destiny's
comes
program-
out?
So obviously he's being petty here, but he's like super checked out of this conversation at this point. Because again, what he said is that the range for consciousness to develop is 20 to 24 weeks. And then what she's saying is, well, here's a number within that range. Can you shoot the baby in the head? And like, obviously the answer is no. Like, you can't be sure if it's conscious. But again, because it's within that range, you can like reasonably assume, well, we probably shouldn't do anything like super crazy here, right? Because like, it is like the likelihood of it being conscious is like pretty high, again, because it is within the range. So she's asked this like 5 times, and he said you should probably just do whatever. Like, you don't have to shoot it in the head if you don't want to, but I
All
don't
right,
know.
to kill it, actually.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out.
Yeah.
Moments after that child exits my body via C-section or vaginal birth,
Okay.
does that child have the right to not be killed? Because that child is in that 20, 24 weeks, and we don't know,
If the child has
according
your
to
level
your
of
science,
consciousness.
we don't know what type of consciousness this child has. So is there anything wrong with saying, well, you survived, we're not going to treat you, we're going to actually actively dismember you or
So,
inject a poison to your heart
If
to
you're
cause a heart
approaching
attack?
my position in good faith, if I'm saying that consciousness develops around 20 to 24 weeks,
But how
then
do
you
you
would
know?
probably draw, because that's when scientists
But
seem to think that.
how
oh,
do
I'm
you
sorry.
know
I thought I was
that the
gonna, I'm so sorry.
child-
I was interrupting your question with my answer.
How do you
my
know
bad.
the
You were gonna
child
ask
at
another
21 weeks and
True.
6 days has consciousness? How do you know? What's changed?
You don't know.
So that's what I'm saying. If
No, that's what I was saying. I was going to answer, but you cut me off. You cut my answer to your
So I
question off
wanna
with another
know, is
question.
it
so
okay
you
to
don't want to
kill
know.
a
You're just trying to run me
child
down a dialogue. here.
after the child
is
is
it okay
born?
to kill a child? Probably not.
Is
I
it
would imagine
okay-
it's probably never okay to kill a child, right? So my answer was that if the cutoff seems to be somewhere around 20 to 24 weeks, if you're drawing policy or legislation because we can't determine exactly when they're conscious, you'd probably be safe and say something like only first trimester abortion. Would probably be like
Yeah, exactly.
a-
Like if
or
you're building,
or
I think
like
most
20
countries,
part would probably
like, well, let me actually check. I think most countries that have like abortion laws usually draw it around first trimester. Let's see. UK abortion laws. Abortion is currently legal up to the first 24 weeks. That's kind of on the later end, but yeah, the UK is first 24 weeks. Like, what about like France? First 14 weeks, so they're even earlier. Germany. It's completely illegal but not punishable during the first 12 weeks. What are other countries? Italy? Let's see what Italy's up to. Are there any Oh, Italy's lit. They just don't care. Just you can get abortion whenever. To be clear, late-term abortions are usually very rare, and they're almost exclusively medically induced or medical necessities. But yeah, I don't know. Where were we?
be about where you go to. That'd be my guess.
Okay, but so the child who's born at 21 weeks and 6 days, or the fetus, or whatever.
That would be past the policy cutoff. So you'd probably say at that point
no,
it should
no,
probably
this
be.
is Destiny's hypothetical world. This is Destiny's hypothetical
Yeah.
world. If you're
Yeah, she's being obstinate right now. The obvious answer that he's going to give is it's after the beginning of the cutoff, so you have to treat it like it's a person.
You're there at the
That's the obvious answer.
delivery room.
Uh-huh.
Are you saying that that child can be killed because we don't know what that child's
In
conscious
Destiny's
level is?
hypothetical world, if
Is
we've
it-
drawn the line at
would you do
20
anything
weeks,
wrong?
if the child is born at 21 weeks, we probably say, okay, well, now that it's
So
born,
now
it's
you've
going to be
changed your
treated.
position in this debate. You went from 20 to 24 weeks, and now you're down to 20, right?
Do you understand the difference between a policy position versus like an epistemic statement or like a moral statement?
Yes,
on
I'm
what
not.
might be?
I'm not a moron. Thank you.
Okay.
I
well,
love how
then
you work.
So he's asking this question because she literally doesn't understand. If she did understand, she wouldn't have said that he changed his position. Because he said his belief is that consciousness usually emerges between 20 and 24 weeks. However, legislatively, you probably want to be on the earlier end of that. So legislatively, we'd pass a law that says no abortions before 20 weeks. And then her attack is, oh, well, now you're flip-flopping now, but like it's wholly internally consistent.
I don't.
These
Well,
questions.
I
Like,
don't know
do
why
you
you-
understand there's a difference between the color blue
I-
and the color purple?
Okay.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never talked to a misogynistic man like this before.
all right.
I still want to know if you think that
You
there's
don't want to know
something
anything. I think
happens-
you answer a question.
Something
I said in the
magical
very beginning of
happens
this.
at birth.
Yeah, I said in the very beginning of this that the cutoff would be 20 to 24 weeks.
And now
right?
you're down to 20. So we've actually we're winning. He's down to 20 now.
Well,
Wait,
think
hold
I
on.
was at
before?
So wait, just a question.
Yeah.
She's just accused. You
I
of being
still don't know why this
misogynist.
guy's
Do you have
here.
a response to that?
I am.
I don't think he has one.
Well, no,
Just
B.
say
I
it
mean,
is.
come on, B.
I'm being honest.
You're not a
I am.
misogynist, Destiny.
I hate women. The more time I spend around them, the more contemptuous I feel about them.
Well, I
in
mean,
every
you're
avenue of life.
trolling, but
I've watched so many Just Pearly Things
Can
videos. I just
can we
can't
go
even.
back to the consciousness stuff with
Sure.
the,
Well,
with
can
the
I even?
toddler?
Apparently.
So obviously this is a big meme, but this is like, in terms of like a debate tactic, this is really good at like kind of pulling the rug out of under your opponents. If they levy like a character flaw at you, you just say, yeah, that's true. And then like, well, what do they do? Because like the whole point of calling him misogynist is, oh, you're a misogynist. Then he's supposed to say, no, I'm not a misogynist. And then here's all the ways I'm not a misogynist. And then so she or Kristan just super tried to derail the conversation. Then he's like, no, yeah, I do hate women. What's next? And like now they have to get back on topic.
Apparently my
Versus that.
position doesn't even exist right now. So let me restate.
No,
I've tried to.
your position's good now. We know where you're at least at. You're at 20 weeks. We've got you moved from 24 to 20 weeks,
Yeah,
right?
so the question of policy is separate from the factual question of when does a conscious experience happen, right? What I stated initially was, it seems like there's a conscious experience that starts at around 20 to 24 weeks.
Can
If
you
that's
name the
case-
biologist?
Google it.
That's why I told you. I actually researched this for several hours today on NIH's PubMed website, and I actually found a lot of pro-choice scientists who are saying
All
children.
right, I'm actually curious about this, so let's Google it. When does consciousness start? Around 24 weeks until age 3. Yikes. Around 24 weeks. Let's just click on this. What's this? Yeah, so this says around 24 weeks. This is like literally a Google search, clicking on the first link. Consciousness. This says between 24 and 28. 24 weeks. At the earliest, after the first trimester, so at least three to 4 months. So that would be the earliest possible. This is saying like what, 12 to 16. So yeah, even just a quick Google search like looks like it's about 24 weeks. This is 2014. This is 2021, and it's saying 3 to 4 months. This is 2020, saying around 24 weeks. So quick Google search, like first page, looks like about 24 weeks is like where consciousness starts. Obviously, this like isn't going into any scientific articles or anything, but
We
Children can
don't-
feel
and-
pain at 12 and a half
Feeling
weeks.
Or
pain
they
is
don't
not
know.
consciousness.
Or they don't
Siblings
know.
can interact with each other at 14 weeks. So just using that data from the NIH's own website would tell you that now your 20-week limit on abortions, which is wrong and probably should be moved
Okay,
down
so
to
I
12
googled
to
this,
14
and the first
weeks.
thing that came up.
Yeah, again, that just doesn't matter. She's talking about things that are nice, but like we don't care about them in terms of like, or Destiny doesn't care about them in terms of like what qualifies as consciousness. Like interacting with pain or like feeling pain like doesn't necessarily mean conscious. Like we can imagine like if someone is incapable of feeling pain, like are they no longer conscious, right? Like that just doesn't matter. And then especially when we think about like other animals and stuff, I'm pretty sure there are like plants, like let me check. I'm pretty sure there are plants that respond like more to outside stimulus than like lobsters do. That's why we boil lobsters, because like they don't interact with heat, like they don't feel like the pain. They just kind of go from alive to not being alive anymore. Like that's the point.
From scientificamerican.com, I'm not sure what research study is. Consciousness requires a sophisticated network of highly interconnected components, nerve cells, its physical substrate, the thalamocortical complex that provides consciousness with its highly elaborate content, begins to be in place between the 24th and 28th week of gestation. Now, I Googled that. That was the first thing I so it's crazy to me that you read all
But-
these studies.
but Destiny.
But however, I will finish. 24th to 28th, I've also seen stuff that says 20th to 24th week. So because I
And
don't want to
REM
murder baby, to
sleep
be
starts at
safe,
18
to be
weeks.
safe, I would probably say I would go with the earlier number because
Yeah. She said that REM sleep starts at 18 weeks. That doesn't matter. He doesn't care about that.
I generally don't want to kill children most of the time. So I would say that the policy position should probably say that on the 20th week, that should probably be the cutoff where we start treating it as a child, and then you give it all the same protections and rights that you would a third trimester pregnancy or a born child. So that's about what it said. No position has changed. I haven't moved at all. At the very beginning of this debate, I said 20 to
clarified.
24 weeks is about. I haven't even clarified. That was the policy position would probably just stop at 20 weeks.
I have a question for Destiny. Do you believe in human rights?
What do you mean by that?
Do you believe in universal, fundamental human rights that all human beings share?
Yes, I do believe there are some universal rights people should have.
Good.
Do they
Does that
objectively
include the
exist?
right to life? Does that include the right to not be killed?
Generally speaking, I would say so. Yeah.
Generally speaking, or yes?
That's
I-
a very difficult question.
Is
If two
it?
countries are at
Is
war
it
with
a
each other,
difficult
does somebody
question?
have a right to
Very
kill an enemy
scary that you
combatant?
can't answer
That's
this
a-
question.
Does somebody have a right to kill an enemy combatant in a war?
Yeah, so in a
Oh, I'm
war,
asking. Okay, yeah,
in
that's
a
what
war,
I'm
there's
saying.
something called there can be something called just war
Just war
theory.
theory.
There's different
Sure.
theories for what makes a war just or unjust.
Okay.
And yes, you can be tried for war crimes
That's
for
sure.
unjustly
I'm just
killing
trying to
I don't-
a civilian.
Okay, I'm just trying to make you understand
Because
that when
they
you
have a right to life
Sure.
as a human being.
I'm just trying to make you understand that when you ask me a question of like, does everybody have a fundamental right to life? Depending on what you're asking, that could be a very,
Well,
very, very
I'll
difficult
say
question.
it again and let me know if this is clear. Do you, as a human being, have a right to not be killed
I would say, generally speaking,
without due process? How about we'll add that?
generally
on.
speaking,
Without
if
due
we
process.
have any sort of construction of government, my imagination
Okay.
would be that a fundamental right would be a right to life, to
Excellent.
not be killed. Yes, I would agree with that. In
Excellent.
any given
and
country,
in the
yes.
United States, under the
Yes.
U.S. Constitution, the 14th Amendment says that we have a right to equal protection under the law,
Mm-hmm.
and no state has a right to deprive the life of anyone without due process.
I
You've
agree.
probably heard this before. Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you think that there is any due process for the human life? Right now, where is the due process for the human life before your consciousness
Well,
arbitrary
I would
land?
say that person isn't protected by the Constitution because they're not a person yet.
Okay, and you're defining personhood based on
Somebody
this
that
20
has
to 24
capability
week.
of having a conscious
And-
experience,
okay,
yes.
So let's talk about that for a minute. If I'm under anesthetic and I'm unconscious,
We're doing the bait and switch with consciousness again, so this
and
is
someone
just
comes up to me and says,
this
"Can
doesn't
I kill
matter.
you?" And I'm unconscious, I can't say, "Don't kill me." Can they kill me?
No,
Tell me why.
because you have the capacity to deploy a conscious
Just like
experience.
the fetus.
Just
No, the fetus can't.
The fe-
And here they're doing another bait and switch with the word capacity. So again, this doesn't
Destiny,
matter.
If you don't kill that fetus, the fetus with a matter of time, because I'm under anesthetic, in a matter of time, I will come out from under anesthetic and I will have my consciousness. For the fetus, if you don't kill that fetus under a matter of time, the natural human development, you were once a tiny child in the womb, maybe 18 weeks before the consciousness that you
Half
say
of
some
me was a
biologists claim
sperm,
for.
half of me was
and
an egg,
if
yes.
no one killed you,
Uh-huh.
then you would have your consciousness, just like I coming out of an anesthetic would have my consciousness. So
you
why
think
is it
that
why so
Uh-huh.
so your position sounds like age discrimination because you're saying that because
cares?
the child is not doesn't have their consciousness yet, just like under
So here with the age discrimination thing, she said it before. This is like an optic win. She's just trying to say, look, you're doing bad thing because discrimination is always bad. And now you're discriminating against age, against people who can't even protect themselves. That's like the win she's trying to go for here.
anesthetic, I don't have my consciousness regained
Do you think
yet.
there are any 2-year-old
then-
human? Do you think there are any 200-year-old?
then you're
do you
saying
think
that
there are
it's
any?
okay to kill them.
Do you think there are any 200-year-old humans that deserve like to be protected by all the human rights that we have fundamentally?
Well, I think if someone lived to be 200, then yeah,
That'd
they
be
would.
pretty awesome.
That would
What
be
about
pretty
right now?
amazing.
Are you
who's
ageist?
actually alive?
What do you mean, am I ageist? If there was a 200-year-old, I'd say yes. If they're alive, that would be amazing.
Okay,
I'd say,
and if
no
there was a
one has the right to
1-week-old
kill you.
having a conscious experience, I would say it as well. I'm
But
not
if
being
the
ageist
200-year-old is asleep and unconscious, I still don't have the right to kill them, Destiny.
because if they're asleep, they can wake up.
Your line of consciousness, your
Hold on, I'm
reasoning
gonna answer
about
you. Hold on, wait,
consciousness
wait, wait,
is
wait.
not
I-
logical.
this
It's
is-
simply
You
this
just
not
stated
logical.
your the
Okay.
the fun.
So I think Lila genuinely is like she's like making a confusion like in her head. I think this Kristan chick is just intentionally not understanding for optics.
fundamental
So-
flaw of your entire position because you keep saying
I understand.
if
So
they
real
wake
quick, I'm
up,
just going to talk now, okay? The
if
way
they
that
wake
this
up-
conversation works is because you two have organizations, because you two are bought in. You can never
Okay, you
even
can't keep
remotely
going to
consider.
that.
Wait,
I
hold
have
on.
to because
That's
I haven't gotten the
Let him
ability to
finish.
even
Here comes
respond
the
to a point.
misogynist. Come on.
It's not misogynist, okay? Now I'm in my demon racial
Did a
energy
bunch of
because you're
men
both white
start
people. So now I'm like
organizations
hitting
as
you because you're
well?
white, okay?
But you can't just throw that zinger in there like, oh, you're only
I
pro-life
have
you
to because
lead
the
pro-life
style of
organizations.
argumentation that you're both engaging in
on.
is like a gish
Is
gallop of 50
scientific.
million questions. Nothing is scientific about this conversation. It's 50 million questions on me being able to respond to or answer anything.
Well,
You
let's
can't
have a
even give
scientific.
hypotheticals.
What is
when-
not
I've got a
scientific
question.
about the argument?
I've got a
That-
question.
This is a question.
Yeah, this isn't a scientific debate. This is a moral debate because the science here doesn't matter. Like, if the science said that life actually starts even before conception, like, that doesn't matter. We wouldn't just say, oh, you, like, can't masturbate now because you're literally genociding millions of babies every single time. Like, the data here doesn't matter.
Got a question.
It's not a scientific
I got a
argument.
question. Got a question here.
None of my
Hold on,
questions have even been
hold on.
answered yet. Yeah, go ahead.
We can go back to your hypothetical, but if
When-
you don't,
Just
if
answer
you
it.
don't answer my clarifying questions
so
about
Lila,
your
I have a
hypothetical,
question
then
for you,
we're
Lila.
not going to get very far.
I got a question for you, Lila.
Yeah.
For everybody here at the table. Wow, it's very heated. Okay. When does life begin?
At the moment of conception, when
The moment of
sperm
fertilization.
and egg unite, when a unique, whole, living human being that never existed before.
I don't know why she's
never
morally
existed
loading. Well,
again,
I know
comes
why,
into
but
existence
morally
with
loading
unique
all of this just doesn't matter.
genetic code. And
Wait, so are
96%,
twins not human?
excuse me,
Hold on. Just
No, they are.
96% of biologists in the University of Chicago study, majority of whom were pro-choice and liberal, confirm that fact that there is no other point at your development can you say you became you than at the moment of conception when your DNA, your genetic code came into existence.
That's
that is a
true.
biological fact. And I'm sorry it's inconvenient to raise that, but
Well-
that is the fact.
And to clarify, I would agree with you.
That's
that
probably true.
If human life began at consciousness, I would say, anything before that human life beginning at consciousness, I would say it doesn't matter. It's not a human life yet. But what's inconvenient for you is that human life doesn't begin at consciousness. Human life and
First of
humans.
all, none
can
of
be-
this is inconvenient
and
for me.
humans can
I'm not
be
a woman.
and
At the end of the day, I'm not going to have a kid, so it's not
Well,
inconvenient for
don't
me
you
at all.
have a
Okay?
kid?
Wait, so
You have a
Destiny,
child.
when,
I
when
didn't
does
give birth to him.
But he's your
when does
you're
life
I'm
the
just saying. You're
father
saying
of
it's
the child.
inconvenient to me, where it's like I'm not. It's not. It's not
Well,
inconvenient
meaning
to
because
me to
I think
recognize.
you're representing the pro-abortion position here, and
Surely
you're
you don't
saying
believe
that
in no
consciousness
uterus,
is
no
the line
opinion.
that
Sure, but I'm
decides
just saying
whether
that you
innocent
keep
people live
saying
or
like
die.
it's inconvenient. None of these facts are inconvenient. I'm totally
Well, they are
willing to
because
address-
they dispute your made up definition of when personhood begins.
There is no. The definition of when personhood begins is literally the subject of our debate. There's not a scientific answer to that question.
What I said
Unless
at
you
the
believe in
very
human
beginning
rights.
is
No,
when
that's
you
bel- human
when you
rights are not
separ-
science.
Excuse me.
That's-
When you,
Human
if you
rights-
separate when human beings
Is that-
come
do you-
into
is that mechanical
existence-
engineering? When do you learn human
Excuse
rights?
me.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, if you separate when human beings come into existence
Okay.
and personhood, and you make it two different lines, it's always bad. Bad things have always happened throughout human history when we tried to separate.
Yeah, and this is what I was saying earlier. At this point, or probably for the entire debate, but her whole point is, even if you're right, it doesn't matter because that's genocidal. And it's like, okay, I guess, but like, I don't care. Like, that's fine.
Separate human beings from personhood. It's always a slippery slope, and bad things always happen, is what we're saying. So
Destiny,
The
sorry,
reason,
go
one more comment.
Don't
The
interrupt
reason,
him.
the reason science is very important for the
I
pro-life
agree, yeah.
debate is because, and the question of human rights is because human rights are about the humans that have rights that are universal. So all humans, if you're a member of the human family, you have these rights. And I think earlier you did, kind of.
keep saying that, but we don't. No. You have more qualifiers.
Can I just finish? Justin,
I'm so sorry.
You did.
My bad.
You
Go
did
ahead.
kind of. It's all right. You did kind of agree. I think you agreed that we have the right as humans to not be killed, right?
No, there
but you
has to be
don't
more
believe in human rights,
qualifications.
but I think
There needs to be
But
more
he didn't even
qualifications. It's not
fully
just humans, because we
agree
agree that corpses, for instance, don't get protection.
So
but
I
there has
think,
to be more
I think
qualifiers.
Destiny,
than that.
I think Destiny, I think your position is not human rights; it's conscious rights. That you have to be you have to have consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and not just have consciousness. You can have it taken away from you, and it comes.
Again, here she's just showing her like misunderstanding of like the way that Destiny is using consciousness, but like he is right, or she is right. Human rights in Destiny's mind aren't like you are like subclass, humanoid. Like that's, or like it's not Homo sapien rights. It's Homo sapien that's conscious rights, and conscious meaning ability to assert oneself in the world, right?
Come back to it, but that is okay. But if the child hasn't developed yet, then that's okay. That's your line.
And Destiny,
that
do you
slippery
want to answer
slope.
the question, just when does life begin?
When
If
does
you-
life begin, or when do they
Yeah.
become a person?
When does human life begin, Destiny?
Whatever your sense of the question
the
is.
personhood thing that I'm looking at?
No, let's
When-
talk about science for a second. When does human life begin? I answer the question, you answer it.
If you're talking about like,
She's
when does
so
the unique genetic code happen,
condescending.
it's
Yeah.
right at the union. It's right at the moment of conception.
When two parts become a whole.
Correct.
Excellent.
Finally, we agree on something.
That's
when human life comes into
hold on.
existence.
Yeah, that's called a scientific fact.
That's what
Wonderful.
we've been saying.
Okay,
in
I
the
understand.
minute.
Let me catch you
Well,
up
there
to
are
the
a lot of pro-abortion
conversation.
people who don't
Sure,
agree with
I
that,
understand. Let me catch you up to
interestingly.
the conversation. We're not having a scientific discussion on when genomes are formed. We're having a moral philosophy discussion on when does something get the protections of being a person.
Correct.
Right?
And our position is simple. And what Kristan was saying earlier is that throughout human history, there have been many times when groups of humans, groups of humans were considered non-persons,
I
right?
don't
and
know
you're,
what this
you're
can
certainly,
I- am I
well,
gonna
you're
get to ask
certainly,
it?
you're certainly
Oh,
familiar
yeah.
with this, Destiny, and I know Kristan
gonna
is.
go
but
back to this
for
question.
example, under the Rwandan genocide or with slavery in our
Yeah,
country,
I understand.
the
That's-
Holocaust,
that's the
there,
next step.
there are groups of people.
Yeah, so this is, she's just reiterating her slippery slope that drawing any line around human, like, Homo sapiens that can be discounted from human rights is necessarily genocidal. And he's wrong for believing that. Which, again, that's not necessarily true.
Who were seen as who were
It was
humans.
Roe v. Wade, KCV Planned Parenthood, and
Who
then I
were-
think it was apartheid in
Just to
South
finish,
Africa.
there
No,
were
actually, I think
human
Roe versus Wade came from that.
There were
I
human
think,
beings.
might have been.
There
Because they were
hum-
inspired by the Nazis, right?
Just
They
to
were
clarify,
like-
there were human beings that were seen as non-persons, and that
True.
opened the
True.
door to huge injustices.
Okay.
And similarly today, we see humans in the womb at this arbitrary line, and you're one among many. I mean, other people say, well, right before birth is when they become human, or viability is when they become human,
Haven't
or
made
heartbeat
either
is
of
when
those
they become
arguments.
human.
That's good,
There's
yeah.
there's a lot of different variations
I think
because
those are all really bad arguments.
Just let her finish. Just let her
I
finish.
agree,
I'm
and I
sorry,
think
my bad.
consciousness is a terrible argument too,
think it's a
because you
great
can't
argument.
assign
That's your opinion.
the development of
Obviously,
a human.
that's why I'm representing
And your
it.
opinion's wrong.
And back to the toddler and the adolescent, because you kind of you had a clever move there, Destiny. You were saying, well, an adolescent has rights, like signing a contract that a toddler doesn't have. So therefore, I think your next conclusion of that was, if you're preborn in the womb
I could
before
also tell you my
consciousness-
conclusion. You don't.
Yeah, to be fair to the other side, that argument was more of like a legal rights thing, so like that was like a little bit slippery. But like what he's getting at is that like the older you are, like the more responsible you are, so the more that like you can assert yourself within your rights. Like a child's right to life, like they don't have the right to be killed, but like they can't just move somewhere, right? Because they don't know any better. No, they can't just pick up and get a job because they don't know any better.
You don't have to guess because I'm
Well,
here.
okay. I mean, feel free to give it. But it was an interesting position, because what I was trying to get to in that conversation before I got a little bit derailed there is, do you think that your age or your development as a human
Mm-hmm.
means you are more or less entitled to equal protection under the law for basic human rights, including the right to not be killed.
If that development, when you say including the rights to not be killed,
That fundamental right to life. Let's just talk
your
about only that
intuition-
right.
your
Only that
intuition
right.
pumping. So
Yeah, just I don't know about intuition pumping. Let's just isolate it and just say just the right to not be killed, the right to not be the victim of homicide.
I don't know. I'm not sure. It depends on what kind of deaths we're talking about. So here's a question, for instance. A lot of women have miscarriages, like without even knowing in the first
True.
few
I've
weeks of
had
getting
one.
pregnant. Do you think that those embryos should be rushed to the hospital?
Well, if the embryo is dead, no. I mean,
Okay,
I think,
but
I
do you
it-
think that like any woman, do you think we should start locking every single woman that has sex into some sort of facility to check for early miscarriages like that? Because if it is true, wouldn't that be the equivalent of a woman leaving a child starving to death on their floor?
No,
No.
absolutely not.
No.
How
So what he's saying, which is a good attack to the a life is a life and a life is worth protecting, is essentially that, okay, a life is a life is worth protecting if, you know, you have any type of sex, heterosexual obviously, where a pregnancy could occur. Risking a miscarriage is like manslaughter, similarly, like kind of by definition, right? Like at least in the world of a life is a life. If you like were to let yourself have a miscarriage, like that should be identical to like manslaughtering your child. So if it's not, why? And that's what he's getting at.
how dare you?
Hold on, can you answer
First
the
of
question?
all,
before
no,
Moral
I-
Dance?
no.
How dare you?
Because what you're talking about right now is essentially the real genocide of children is all the children being miscarried
How
right
dare
now
you
in the first few weeks
equate
of
a
development. That's horrible.
miscarriage
Yeah.
to not feeding my child.
Why? It should be the same thing.
No, it's not.
Why is it not?
Well, you obviously
It's not because.
Oh my gosh.
It's not because.
Well, hold on, you're telling
Every
me.
woman
hold
in
on,
America
if you want to
who's
extend
just
human
had a
protections
has had a
all the
miscarriage
way
is
to
very
the
angry.
very
Hold on,
beginning,
one
the
at a
very
time,
moment
one
of
at a time,
conception,
please.
if you want to go all the way to the moment of conception, then that means that a woman who just whatever kind of miscarries in the first, second, or third week and doesn't realize it, that is the same as like, oops, somebody dropped their child down the stairs and they died.
No,
That
it's
is
not the same.
absolutely not the same. Do you understand
So now it's on them to explain why that's different.
science of what happens in a miscarriage? And
Tell me.
an unattended miscarriage?
Unattended. That's why I'm saying we should lock them up after they have sex.
I don't think
Destiny,
your argument doesn't make any sense.
My argument makes perfect sense.
no,
if
it
you
actually
truly
lock a
believe,
woman up,
it's
I'm gonna
actually
say, I'll
very
restate my
heinous.
argument.
It might be more
I'll
likely
restate
to
my argument.
miscarry
I
because of
understand
the
it's really,
stress.
I know it
Which is
hurts
why I
because
don't
it
think we
obviously
should jail
demonstrates
pregnant
another
women,
huge
quite
flaw.
frankly.
If you
Can I-
believe
can I
that the
finish?
moment
Can I-
of
can
no,
I-
you can't right now. If you believe that at the moment of conception you've created a unique human being, then that means that right now you should be in tears because at every moment women that are engaged. In fact,
Yes.
you could probably make the argument that sex without the intention of immediately going to a hospital is probably immoral because you're engaging in some activity that might result in the death of a child
think-
in
I'm sorry,
2 or
I don't
3 or
think-
4
I don't
weeks
think-
because you don't know if you're going to have a
You don't
miscarriage.
think women-
This is true logically. Obviously, emotionally, this is a really hard sell. But like in terms of like logical consistency, like this is true. Like if you have sex recreationally, then like you're being pretty reckless in their world.
Women
Every
can
single
gestate
time,
a human
every
being
single time a
and
woman has sex,
be
she should
Guys, one
probably
at
be
a
rushed
time.
to a
Please,
hospital
please, please, one at a
immediately
time.
after,
One
just
at a
to
time.
Why is he wearing shades?
Whatever fetus might be there is absolutely
No,
protected out of
I
it.
don't
Destiny,
think.
let me answer your question.
That is misogyny because what you're saying is
I'm back.
women
Here we go,
cannot
buzzword time.
gestate human
Destiny loves
beings
his
in the
hypotheticals.
womb and
Let me
be
answer.
productive citizens of our society.
They should.
That's exactly that is
So,
misogyny,
Destiny,
sir.
I don't
That's
know
exactly
that.
what.
Hold on, let's let Lila
Okay,
go.
I
Go
don't
ahead,
know. I
Lila.
think your question might betray perhaps a little ignorance about how pregnancy works.
Okay, inform me,
Because
please.
because
Or
if
how
a woman
miscarriage
gets pregnant, rushing her to the hospital is not going to magically prevent a miscarriage that she may or may not have. Miscarriages happen for a lot of different reasons, and I would argue, especially for imprisonment as an example, imprisoning a woman who's pregnant, which I am opposed to, by the way, that additional stress could add to the miscarriage. So if you
right.
grabbed a woman after she had sex and might be pregnant and dragged her off to a hospital, that might actually induce stress in her. And
Yeah, but there's
create a
also
miscarriage.
potentially
So I'm
things,
not
there's
sure
behaviors a woman
where
can
you're
engage
going
in that
with
would increase the risk of miscarriage, especially if she doesn't know she's pregnant, right? Maybe
Say-
a woman
say-
drinks.
Say that one more time.
There might
Destiny.
be behaviors that a woman could engage in if she
Which
is
is
pregnant
why-
that would increase
which
the
is
risk of
why-
pregnant.
which is
However,
why-
that means that
Destiny.
you could have sex with a
Destiny.
condom and with birth control, and you might actually
Destiny.
get pregnant. So if
That's
a woman
right,
is
you
having
can.
sex and she starts drinking or whatever, she
That's
could be
right.
murdering a child right then and there.
Destiny, let me
That's
answer that.
true.
That's why we have recommendations from the FDA that women who are pregnant should not drink alcohol.
No. You don't even know if you're pregnant
But
yet,
see,
though. That's the whole deal.
That's different.
That's the
Yeah.
difference between direct and indirect actions, though, right?
Again, we don't care about this. This direct versus indirect, like, this doesn't matter.
What is,
I don't know why she keeps bringing it up. She doesn't care about this.
it
So-
doesn't get much more direct than doing
No,
things to
if
your
a
body
woman
that
is
harms your
pregnant
child.
and does not know she's pregnant, say she just conceived and she goes and celebrates her 20th birthday at a bar, 21st birthday at a bar, and she drinks a whole bunch, and she miscarries, no one would say
You murdered your child.
you murdered your child.
Of course
no one
you
would say
did.
that. That's not that was not the intent.
It doesn't matter what the
There-
intent.
Yeah, and this is exactly like the point is that if you like miscarried your 1 week old fetus because you got hammered, like in the super pro life world where a life is a life, you killed somebody, not on purpose, but like it doesn't matter. You killed somebody. Like this is like the intent argument. Like we don't care about intent. You manslaughtered your
the
child.
difference what the intent
between
is?
the
You've murdered a
intent.
child.
Abortion. What is abortion? Abortion is the direct, intentional
Wait.
killing of an
Do
innocent
you think
human
from the
being.
perspective of the fetus, do you think it cares if
That
it was an
is a
accident or intentional,
direct
that it was...
action. We're arguing about the morality of abortion, which you've informed me like 5 times because you don't want to talk about science.
Sure, but what I'm saying is that if you think that from
Abortion
the moment
is
of
a direct-
conception...
I will say, I'll give you this,
Intentional
Destiny. If you're having sex, and this is actually goes to a related conversation to the abortion
New
conversation,
topic.
but that's very important. I think,
topic is you
anyways,
guys didn't answer any of my other questions.
sexual
I have a
ethics.
question, actually. I have
And
a
I
question.
think you're
Why is he cutting her
I guess,
off?
For the sexual ethics world,
Can-
which I think is important, so we could go there. 'cause
Sure.
If you're
I
having
do have-
Well,
Am I allowed
heterosexual
to,
sex,
am I allowed to ask any of my questions because none of them got answered?
Well, I would
Do you want to
argue.
reiterate them?
Sure, I had like 3 really basic
Can I
ones.
answer his little hypothetical though,
Yeah,
really
answer it.
quick? Okay.
Sure.
About the mass genocide of
Well,
accidental
no, it
babies.
was more about, if you're having sex,
like
should you be
carrying
heavily
sex.
drinking afterwards? I think was where you were going with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, no, you shouldn't actually. I don't think, and this is part of our society's problem today, post-sexual revolution.
This is a really good answer. Basically, what she's saying is that, like, if there is even a chance, which there's always a chance, unless you're infertile, I guess. If there's even a chance that you could get pregnant, drinking afterwards is really irresponsible, which is totally consistent with what she claims to believe, right? Again, this Kristan chick seems like really unreasonable, but Lila seems like she's trying to engage honestly and like she genuinely believes what she's saying and she's like trying to have a good conversation.
Is we have separated sex from procreation and from relationship.
Okay.
And because of that, we have the abortion rate of 2,500 children killed every day by abortion. Because of that, we have mass unhappiness. We have breakdown among male-female relationships. People actually are having less sex in many ways than before. Pornography use is spiking. And it's all because we've forgotten what sex is designed for, which is intimacy and new life. So I would be against a culture, and I am against acts where people are just being promiscuous, having sex, not
Literally,
really caring.
none of that has
And then-
anything to do with what I said because everything that I described happened could literally happen within a marriage where a woman gets
Well-
pregnant, doesn't realize
well-
it, has some
Hold
alcohol.
on,
Well,
Slim.
well,
and
then I'll
Let-
answer
let
to that
Tess-
too.
hold on,
Well,
Slim.
actually, let me answer that too because I'm
Okay.
married.
I'm just saying that nothing what I gave had anything to do with the
Okay,
sex
well
culture or anything else, yeah.
then thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
I can relate to your question. I'm married. We hope to have another baby, and yes, when I know if I might be fertile, I might be getting pregnant soon. Yeah, I'm not going to be
Getting
drinking
drunk.
gin and tonics because I might be getting pregnant, and I want to have my body be as hospitable as possible for that baby. And I think that would be the prudent thing to do, and that's another reason.
Yeah, this is totally consistent. This is like a good argument on her end.
If as a woman and you're having
We weren't
sex, you
talking
might
about
get
what was
pregnant
prudent or
to
not. We
be-
were talking about like moral rights or wrongs. But
Well, I think it would be morally irresponsible, yes, to be getting drunk when you may be getting pregnant, yes.
on the same
'Cause
level as like
creating-
murdering a child, right?
Creating a new human being is a
there's
logical
a bit of a
Hold on,
outcome
just one
of
microphone at a time,
heterosexual
please.
sex. And so that's what Lila is saying.
So there shouldn't be a difference, which is kind of like the consciousness argument that they're going to get into a little bit later, but there shouldn't be a difference because again, if a life is a life, then like killing a child is killing a child, right? It doesn't matter if it's, 1 week old or, negative 9 months old, right? Like that doesn't matter. If you're killing a child, you're killing a child, period.
Is that if you're engaging in heterosexual sex, you have to be aware that one of the very biological outcomes of that behavior, of that choice you've made, is creating a unique, whole, living human life. So therefore, you have consented to the fact that a unique, whole, living life may come into an existence by engaging in that act knowingly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Destiny, did you have more?
I
know
said it
you had
very
a couple
slow,
of questions.
Very
very
simple
clear.
questions.
Did
Do
you
we
have-
agree that is puberty a real thing?
Absolutely, puberty is a real thing.
Okay. When does it happen?
It's a range.
Oh, well, hold on. I know
where he's going. I know he's
can
where
I,
he's going
Can I
with
just
it.
make a
Go ahead,
comment here?
Lila.
But that's
There is-
fundamentally
hold on,
different
there's-
between.
Hold on,
Let me
let's
just
let
like
Lila
this.
go.
There's
Can I
an
answer this?
absolutely there's
Can I answer this? This is my question.
sure. If you
Lila,
want.
like, I love you, but
Yeah.
you don't let me answer any questions.
Yeah, Lila.
All right,
Jesus.
So, I'm
So
just gonna,
rude.
like,
You're being misogynistic.
I mean, I
Sure.
think it's been pretty.
I've been
No.
trying to be.
I think they're
good.
both. I think they're both
All right, Kristan,
misogynistic.
We
Okay.
need hands.
True.
No,
Amen.
I understand where the question was. You brought this up earlier about puberty. Yes, absolutely, puberty is a real thing. I have 2 pre-teens right now.
Okay.
I'm reminded every day that puberty is a real thing. And absolutely, it onsets at different ages based on the environment, based on a child's experiences or stress that the child may be going through, or the genetic conditions that a child may have. But that's not an equivalent for saying, well, we don't know when human life begins, when we know it.
So these are the equivalent. Basically, like to illustrate in like a hypothetical, like let's say there was some type of disease that it kills kids right before puberty, like the day before they start puberty. When should you bring? And then the doctors have like a 24-hour period to like screen for the disease and like stop it before it kills them. When do you bring them in? And like this is kind of like the same. This is like the argument that they're making. Is like what they're trying to say is, well, you don't know when you can bring them in, so it's all arbitrary at XD. And it's like, well, no, like if there's a range, there's earlier ends of the range. That's probably like the safest time to like address these types of issues.
Actually begins, and we've already proven is a scientific fact, begins at the moment of conception. Therefore, we can kill a human being.
Okay. So
It
all
is
I'm
not
trying
the
to
same.
illustrate to you is that
Can I
you
answer
believe
now?
in.
No. Is that okay?
Yes,
Okay.
Lila, go
All right.
ahead.
Add in
and
what
then
I
we'll
did
have you
too.
come in. We'll have you come in. Go
Thank
ahead,
you,
Lila. Go
Kristen.
ahead.
So I would just say, yes, there is a sliding time frame from when someone might undergo puberty. But if you are basing a decision about whether or not you can kill an innocent prepubescent or pubescent child, then I would say your standard of puberty shouldn't matter. Similarly to your standard, your
Yeah, this attack doesn't matter. She's not really addressing the answer. Which, like, this is what she's making is like a pretty emotional argument, or it's like, well, if you're gonna kill prepubescent kids, then like, you know, who cares, right? And like, I understand why you'd say that, but like, he's trying to have like a purely logical, consistent argument, and like they're more like speaking about like their intuitions, where it's like, well, I'm not even going to address this because, you know, if you're deciding whether or not you're going to kill a kid based on when puberty starts, then, like, you know, why should I even listen to anything you're saying, right?
just standard of consciousness to demand that a baby that's not fully developed yet has to be developed in order to be protected. And I think that's age discrimination.
Gotcha. Okay. So all I'm trying to point out is
Do you agree you are age discriminatory, by the way? Do you agree?
I
Because you
am
said
age.
that.
Do you think? Are you age discriminatory?
So you're age discriminatory about when human beings should have
I'm
the
age
right to
discriminatory
live.
about a lot of different things.
So you believe that you are age discriminatory about
I'm
when human beings.
developmentally discriminatory.
Typically, developmental discrimination is for the protection of the less developed person. It's
Or it
not
could
for
be
the
for the
manipulation.
protection of a mother that doesn't want to have a pregnancy
It's
too.
not
There
for
is
the-
another
it's
person
not
in the
for the
equation here, you know.
manipulation.
Again, they're like kind of
Side
making
by
a
side.
like moral, like they're trying to like morally grandstand here.
A mother is being forced to be a breeding factory for a child.
you know what I
Or
actually
I can
is-
morally loathe
Wait,
this just the other way if you
Jesse,
want. If you want to
Jesse.
play that game, I can do that.
Do
all
you
day.
know
I
what
think your
happens
argument
when-
actually isn't consciousness. I think you are making a bodily autonomy argument.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. That's the
You
dumbest argument in the
absolutely
world.
are because you said the mother has a pregnancy. No, the mother.
No, I'm just trying to show
mother
you that
has a
if you
human
want to
being
morally loathe things like
developing within her.
murder of a child, well, then I'm going to say, well, forcing a
Well,
mom
you
to be a
didn't agree
breeding
with
machine.
me about my analogy about artificial wombs.
What
either.
I
You
didn't
said
agree, I
abortion
rejected
would-
it because I said it was dumb because viability has no impact whatsoever on my feelings on whether or not a fetus is endowed
But
with
I
rights
think
for human life or not.
Kristen is correct in that you are sort of talking out of both sides of your mouth a little
I'm
bit here. because
absolutely
on
not.
the
Right now, I'm
one
struggling to
hand-
talk out of one side of my mouth.
on
and
the,
then you're
well,
getting cut off.
on the one hand, Destiny, you're saying that it should.
Yeah, to be clear, I think Lila genuinely is having like a hard time like wrapping her head around what he's saying. Which again, that's like fine. Like it's not that she's dumb or anything. It's like they're just using different words differently, or like they're using the same word differently on at least 3 different occasions. I think Kristen's just trying to get moral wins or get optical wins.
Shouldn't matter whether or not the mother wants the baby or doesn't want the baby if the baby is conscious. And on the other hand, you're saying actually the mother's desire to have or not have that baby, being forced to birth that baby, actually does matter. So that's a little bit of a contradiction.
So
Yeah,
it's not a contradiction at all. Whether or not somebody wants to have a child or not is not the same as when does the child get moral protections. Those are two fundamentally separate questions.
You're saying you
However,
should not be.
I might
you
want.
were
I
saying
might
a
want.
woman
I
should not
might
be
want.
forced to give birth.
I
You were
might
using
want
that language.
No, well, because you're using the
Yes.
language of like killing a child.
No, you're ending the life of an innocent human
Yeah,
being that is
thank
a
you for
child.
illustrating my point. Yes, yes.
You're
Well, if
So
it's
if you're
not-
gonna
Why are you
hold
so
it-
offended?
Hold on.
Why are you so
Hold on,
offended by the word
I'm
child?
not,
Use the word
I'm not
that
offended
doesn't
because
make
when
sense.
you
It's triggering
say
you,
child, it's
Destiny.
not that it's triggering me.
It's absolutely triggering
It's
you because
co-
you've said it like 6 times.
because you're begging the
Are
question.
you triggered,
Okay.
Destiny? Confirm or deny?
I
Are
am
you
triggered.
triggered?
Okay. So hold
I
on,
actually,
hold on.
you know what?
Yeah,
I
He's
have.
very
the problem is that right now, the
This is the
point of
worst
it,
moderator
it's
I've
kinda
ever
like
seen in my
going through
entire
a
life.
self-defense trial and having the people that you killed being called victims.
Well, hold on,
right?
hold on. You're the one who's advocating for the positive right to kill a child in the womb. That,
Okay.
you're the one advocating for that.
Okay.
We're advocating to say you can't kill a child. So that's it's.
I'm just trying to explain why calling it a child is
But
begging
why
the
does that?
question.
But why
Hold on,
does that bother you?
I'd actually
why does
like
it
to
bother
It
you?
bothers
understand-
me because the subject of the debate is whether or not it is a child. So if you call it a child, you're already presupposing the most
but
difficult
not-
part of the conversation,
It's
which
bother-
is begging
it's
the
bothering
question.
me.
But I think,
bothering
but that's a contradiction too, Destiny, because
not a contradiction.
It is because you just said you said that you become a person at consciousness. This
Yep.
arbitrary line that you've drawn that's
True.
not even
Yep.
that's not even clear.
Yeah.
And
No,
you're
it's
saying-
very clear,
But
but
you're,
go ahead.
you
Pretty
never,
clear, yeah.
You never
Who
were
hasn't
upset.
named
you
any
never talked about
biologist,
when
by the way,
childhood
turns
began.
out.
So let's actually talk about that.
When is a
Does
what?
Who cares?
childhood begin at a different time than when personhood begins?
Childhood is whatever you want. Some childhood begins when you see your first Sesame Street episode. I don't know. What does childhood mean?
Okay, when does a child become a child? When is it
Is it
okay
at
to
birth?
call a preborn life a child in your
I don't
view?
know. That's a semantic question I'm not really
So why are you
interested
upset
in.
about us using the word if you don't really
Because
have an
we're not
opinion
just
on it?
having semantic disagreements. We're having like very discrete disagreements on morality
where
over
do you
whether
I don't know what
use
this
that?
flashing
When
is that
do you
keeps
use
My
happening. I don't
disagreement
know
is
what
I
it
don't
is.
think that
Child.
it becomes a person at
But
conception
you
that's
just said
endowed
you
with
don't
human
like
rights.
us using the word child. When
I
does
don't
the
like
life
you
become
know
a child?
because now you're just asking about childhood and now you're asking child. The reason
I'm
why we're
asking
arguing
when you,
over the
when you start having
Sure.
your childhood, when you start
Okay.
becoming a child.
Let me know when I
is
can
that?
fully answer the question. Okay.
Please tell me.
Okay.
So the allegation that they're levying is basically that like, oh, there's something going on with like the word child that's like making you upset. I don't. This isn't like a real argument. They're just, I don't know. But what he's saying is that no, it's not that the word itself means anything. It's that the way you guys are using it is like presupposing that it ought to be something worth protecting, right? Like no one, like when people are saying, oh, like abortion. When people talk about abortion, they're not talking about gunning down a child, right? They're talking about removing the fetus from the body. So when you describe it as chopping a child up, like you're trying to win optical points with the audience, and that's what he's pointing out is that trying to win these optical points doesn't do anything for the argument. Like they should know they're doing it, and then Destiny obviously knows that they're doing it. So the fact they're doing it is just trying to win optical points with the audience.
Okay. We're having a conversation right now about when something is endowed with like moral consideration. When
I'm
does
asking
something
you a pretty simple question, actually.
Are you a liar?
I'm just asking.
I asked you to if I could finish. You said I could, and now you cut me off.
Let's let
you
Destiny
lied to me.
finish
Okay.
the,
let me finish the question.
for it.
Don't
Go
lie,
for it.
because you'll lose moral consideration. Okay. All right. No. If the subject of the debate is when does a fetus become a person?
I would have checked out of this conversation by
Child is
now.
another word for person. So when you say,
Okay, that's
do
what I
you
was trying
think
to
it's
clarify.
Hold on.
okay?
Let-
When you
let-
say,
please let
do you think
Destiny
it's
finish.
okay to kill a child? Obviously, the answer is no. I don't think it's okay to kill a child. But that's not the
What do you
conversation
call
we're
it
having. The
before it's a
conversation we're
child?
having
Please,
is
just let him
when is
finish.
something considered a child? So that's why I'm obviously going to push when you say you're saying we should kill children
What do
at
you call
2
it?
weeks old. I don't know, a fetus, whatever you want to call it.
But do you know what the Latin word fetus means?
I don't care. I'm not Latin.
It means young one. It's another word for child.
That's great. There are young ones that are puppies.
Yeah, this is a semantic argument. This doesn't matter. She's trying to get a semantic win here.
That doesn't
a human
have any
child
bearing
for
on
a
me.
birth.
You're not
actually-
going to
that's a very
etymologically like
interesting
win the
question
debate
for
against
you.
me.
So just
do you
to
think
clarify,
puppies get consciousness at a certain point?
Not human
just to
consciousness,
clarify,
no.
we're only allowed to call
That would be an
a
interesting
human
question.
life a child at Destiny's arbitrary line of consciousness. Is
What
that
I'm
correct?
saying is that
Because you're very offended when we use this term, so I'm trying to understand when it is in your book correct to use
If
it.
anybody is triggered in this room, it is not me. Okay.
That's good.
So it's funny that you keep using the offended line. I'm used
Okay,
to the
you
bros.
disagree strongly.
No, I don't disagree. You're just
You
like
don't disagree.
presupposing the argument. That's the
It's
issue.
pissing you off when we use the word child, is what we're saying.
Confirm or deny? Are you
Confirm or
pissed
deny?
off, Destiny?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm pissed off watching this, honestly.
Wait, no, hold on.
Wait,
It's the same thing as you guys, because I know you guys, and I guess maybe this is just like in your brain, is how you approach these conversations. But I know you guys get frustrated when people argue with you, and you're like, you just want to take rights away from the mom. Oh, so you're trying to make moms
Well,
slaves?
I would-
You're turning moms into baby factories?
yeah.
That would be, if I wanted to engage in the same style of conversation you're engaging in, I would just say that over and over again. Why do you
No,
want to make moms baby
I would-
factories?
I
Why
would
do you want to
ask
make
them
moms
to-
slaves? You know what is really problematic is when we take away rights from certain groups of people and we force them to do things with their bodies that they don't want to. A lot of eugenics was done that way. A lot of the Nazi concentration camps done that way. In Japan, Unit 343 did a lot of weird things like that, or whatever the fuck,
That's
right?
up to the
So
cases
if
of
you're gonna
sex,
if you're gonna
she's
make the
no
argument that like, oh
engagement
well,
behavior.
viewing people as people sometimes and not as really problematic, then I'll say, okay, well, restricting rights from people, especially women, has also been really problematic
Yeah.
historically.
So-
Welcome
True.
to women's suffrage. Welcome to women being able to own property. Welcome to women having access to birth control.
Thank
Welcome
you
to
for
women
explaining
being able to
women's
do.
rights to
All right, no
us.
problem. I'll do it
That's
since you
it.
guys have the problem with the
So-
understanding.
thank
So
you.
yeah, so
Yeah.
but I'm saying I'm not doing that because that's boring to me. Because obviously, if you guys thought that a fetus wasn't a human life, then you would obviously agree with me. And if I agreed that a fetus was a human life, I would obviously agree with you. So
Wait,
when
wait,
you
wait. You
use
don't believe in
normatively
Hold on, let
loaded
him finish.
terms,
Let him
This is
so
an
when you
important
use
point.
when you use normatively loaded terms like murder a child or commit homicide, then all you're doing is you're begging the
You
question
don't know,
because
they're not-
obviously
Okay.
nobody at this table and nobody in this room believes in killing children or committing homicide
Okay.
against children.
Except
the
that
question
I have
is,
a question
when
for
does it
Destiny.
become a child? That's
I
the
have a
whole
question
No,
for you, though,
I-
because you just said when the fetus becomes a human being. When does the fetus become a human being, Destiny?
the personhood comes when the conscious experience starts, which is
Okay.
about
But
20 to 24 weeks. Yep.
wait. Biology says moment of conception, life begins.
Biology.
Here, she's trying to trap him on a misspeak. This is like really annoying. If she's engaging with him honestly, she should know what he means. Like, obviously, it's on him to like be more clear. He's like super frustrated and like checked out. So like, I understand, but like, he should be a little bit more clear. She's obviously trying to catch him on a misspeak for an optics win.
Does not tell you.
No,
Hold on, wait,
stop,
I'm not-
stop. Excuse me.
Biology does
Excuse
not
me.
tell
I'm
you when
gonna start
human
talking
rights.
to you like I talk to my 4 boys. Excuse me.
Can we,
Human
hold
life
on,
comes
wait,
into
hold on,
existence at the
Kristen,
moment
Kristen,
it's
Kristen,
accepted.
one
No, let her
sec,
do it.
Kristen,
Go
one
ahead.
sec, one sec.
Yeah.
If we can, and you know, there's been some comments about this. I would like everybody here at the table to have an opportunity to speak. So if we can
Everybody,
including Kiki, yes. So if we can try to limit the interruptions, let people finish their thought, and then, you know.
Oh, the
go
video's
on.
kinda
I'd
quiet,
like
okay.
Destiny to have time to speak. I'd like Lila to have time to speak. Kristen.
Yeah,
you as
I
well.
mean,
Go
like, the
ahead,
thing
Kristen.
Fetus. When does it
Like, the thing about, you know, calling fetuses children, like, that's fine if you want to do that. The big issue isn't what you call it. Like, it, you know, because, like, again, like, you're morally loading it, right? The big issue is that, oh, okay, why should we protect, you know, organic matter that might become a person, right? Like, because my personal opinion is that if people are going to get abortions anyways, they should probably be able to do it safely. And there should also probably be a limit where it's like, okay, you probably shouldn't be able to, because at this point, this is like just flagrant irresponsibility, right? Like, if you're 8 months pregnant and you're like, yeah, it's time for me to get an abortion, it's like for fun, because I don't want to have the child anymore. It's like, okay, this is like a level of negligence that's just like probably shouldn't be allowed. But on the flip side of it, it's like, okay, like, at some point it has to, like, at least what Destiny's argument is at some point it has to transition from organic matter to person. And they're saying that transition never happens, it just is. Like, it's always a person. And he's saying, well, I don't know if you believe that. That's kind of what the whole argument is. So it's just super annoying that, like, at least this Christian chick is, like, totally not even trying to understand what he's saying. Like, Lila's trying. She's just, like, making, like, semantic errors or making the conversation a lot harder than it has to be.
does the fetus become a human being? Because biology says, biologists confirm, 96% confirm, that the moment of conception, you became a human being. You became a member of our species. But you kept saying the word, it's not a human being. So when does the child,
he obviously
or entity
misspoke
or whatever
here.
term you want to use, it doesn't trigger you in the
Yeah.
womb,
Uh-huh.
become a human being.
20 to 24 weeks.
So you're actually, wait a minute. This is very important because you didn't say this at the beginning of the debate. Beginning of the debate, you were making a moral argument, but you weren't saying that
He
it
just
wasn't a
changed
human
his
being.
position from person to human being.
This is what Lila and I were exactly. This is what I pointed out like 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
That you are using an argument.
Yeah, so Kristen's being giga dishonest. She's just trying to get optic wins, and then Lila's like, wait, that's a good point. You did say that. Like, he didn't obviously he didn't change his mind here. Like, yeah. Kristen's ruining this
saying
conversation.
That it's consciousness. That consciousness gives that human being these special personhood rights not to be killed. But I made the argument a while back that you aren't really making that argument because when I presented a couple other scenarios to you, you wouldn't agree with me. But the argument, what you just said.
What was a scenario where I didn't agree?
The argument you just said was it wasn't a human being. You just said, for everybody here, that it becomes a human being at 20, 24 weeks.
Okay.
That is scientifically unsound because what we've already proven to you.
That's true. That's not what he means, obviously.
Is that the moment of conception, a unique human being comes into existence. Do you agree with me that a human being is present in a mother's womb at the moment of conception?
If you want to define human being as unique genetic code that appears, then we can call that a human being. But the conversation that we're having right now is not about what a human being is. The conversation we're having is when does something get granted rights or moral consideration.
So here, he just needs to say that he misspeaks because the fact that he doesn't looks like to the audience that he did actually change his mind.
So I think you
And
need
I
to be
would
careful
say,
with your terms then. Because
Hold
you
on.
kept saying
you're the
human
one that's
being.
mixing everything up. I've been pretty clear, and I'll continue to be clear, because you're trying to ask me, yes or no, when does it become a human being? And if you're defining human beings as the thing that gets rights, then I'll say it 20 to 24 weeks. The thing that I've said over and over again, and if you want, I can write this word down. What I am talking about, and I've used this term before, is person or personhood.
Right.
And I
And-
think that a person is not a collection of cells. A person is not some body parts. A person is not something that responds to pain or heart pumping blood. When we think of people or persons, we think of people that are having subjective conscious experiences like we have now.
So I have a
when we
question.
think
What
of when somebody
experiences?
dies, we think of that subjective conscious experience ending. That's why earlier the question that I asked that I will never get an answer to, and I understand why you won't answer it. I asked you
Which
if a
we
person
already
is going to be in a
answered.
coma for the rest of their life, will never wake up, can you kill them? The answer is obviously yes, but the reason why you won't say that that's okay is
No.
because a comatose person possesses every
I will
single
answer the
thing
question
that
for
the
you.
pre-conscious fetus has.
Let me answer the
So if you
question.
can kill that comatose person, you can probably kill the
No,
pre-conscious
you're not
fetus.
killing.
But the problem
I think it's
is
wrong
that you
to
won't
take a
answer that
gun
question
and
because of
kill
that.
the
Yeah.
person in a coma. I think it would be wrong to take sofa clamp and dismember that person
100%.
limb from limb who's in a coma.
This is like so gruesome. I don't know why she's more. Well, I know why. She's like morally loading everything. Like she's literally out here like, no, I don't think if someone's in a coma, you should be able to fucking suplex them head first into the ground, split their head open, and like rip their legs off and beat their dead body with the. It's like, bro, no one's saying all that. Okay, all we're saying is that consciousness seems to be a thing we care about. That's all we're saying.
I think it's wrong to take a needle and insert digoxin into that person's heart who's in a coma and cause a cardiac arrest. All things that happen during abortion, by the way. We would never argue that a person who's in a coma, whether we know they're brain dead or they're not brain dead, we don't know because we don't have an actual scenario we're talking about here. But we would never say you actively kill a person who's in a coma. What Lila said, what
I agree
have
with
said,
that. I agree.
is you can actually remove care. You can remove the
I've already
breathing
demonstrated that
apparatus
you don't
to
agree with
see
this
if the
argument.
person.
Yeah, they don't care about this care argument. This care argument's stupid. The active care or the removal of extraordinary care like just doesn't matter because to reiterate this argument, she's saying that there's a difference between removing extraordinary care and removing ordinary care. Where if someone's in a coma, you can just not like go out of your way to keep them alive anymore, and like you can. That's obviously different than like, you know, we're not going to provide their body with nourishment, right? But like you're still killing them either way. It's just how gruesome or how reckless or how irresponsible the killing is. Just like with a child, you could shoot a child in the head as an abortion, or you could like not feed them and then they starve to death, or you could just, get a regular abortion, or you could have a miscarriage. These are all the child dying. That's like it doesn't matter whether or not you're actively versus passively killing them or whatever.
This is not an argument that you agree
No,
with.
you just said we didn't answer the argument in your question, but we did.
Yeah,
Well, what
okay.
happened was there was a bit of filibustering where
Sure.
I was
If you
trying
want,
to
we
get
can very
clarification.
clearly
You
get
don't
to the
like
bottom
our
of this, or we
answer,
can ramble on
Destiny.
to irrelevant things. Do you
You
want to
just
get to the bottom
you
of
don't
this?
like our answer, so
Okay.
you say we didn't
So
answer your
what you're
question.
doing is you're pointing out a difference. So sometimes in moral philosophy, people want to point the difference between doing and allowing harm, and there might be a fundamental moral difference between doing harm to somebody versus allowing harm to somebody. And you're
depends what you mean by
you're-
those actions.
Sure, you're trying to draw some difference here between doing and allowing harm. However, none of us here believe that that matters in this case, right? Because if you look at a child, none of us here would say that one is morally okay to allow harm versus one is morally okay to do harm.
Definitely,
For instance,
it-
if you had a child that was connected to an insulin tube or a feeding pump because they had issues with digestion or feeding, you wouldn't say that, like, okay, actively killing the child is wrong, but if you just disconnected their insulin pump, that would be okay because you're passively killing the child. We would say no, they have a fundamental right to survive and be alive, and you would say the same thing to a person connected to a machine, because if a person was in a coma, or not in a coma, let's say they were just unconscious, okay, and we knew they were going to wake up in 2 weeks, or there was a high likelihood of it, we would say it's probably unethical to unattach that person to the machine, even if all they did was sit there and starve to death.
Definitely.
So this weird description that you're trying to, or this weird dichotomy you're trying to make between doing versus allowing harm doesn't apply here when we talk about moral consideration
It
of different
absolutely
types.
I think
applies
you're
when it
making.
talks to
I think you're. I think
Don't
there's
say
a
false analogy
there's
again.
I think there's an oversimplification here when you're talking about moral philosophy, because
Yeah.
a lot of it goes into who has the responsibility, what my responsibilities and duties are to you.
That's right.
So if I am a doctor and my responsibility and duty is to my patient, and I have a child who's getting an insulin treatment, yes, it would be homicidal of me to rip the treatment away from the child.
Yes.
If I am a parent and my duty and responsibility as a parent is to provide nourishment for my child, and I rip that nourishment away from my child, then yes, that would be potentially a homicidal act. It could lead to death, and it certainly would be a case of neglect and perhaps abuse. So similarly, if I, as a parent, have these responsibilities to my children, then it would be morally wrong for me to not live out those responsibilities. And every child is dependent on his or her mother. I do not suddenly become a child or a person at consciousness. We don't even have a clear line of when that is. We haven't been able.
So, like, this doesn't really make sense. Basically, what she's saying is, like, what's considered active versus passive harm is based on what you have the responsibility to do. So, a doctor disconnecting, a feeding tube is actively killing somebody. But, like, again, we don't really care about that, right? Some random person just, some random kid just, like, walks in the hospital room and says, ooh, what's this? And unplugs it. And now the person isn't getting fed and they die. Like, that person still died. We don't really care. Like, legally we care. But, like, morally, it's like, we don't actually care whether or not they actively or passively were killed. One is certainly more gruesome or more nefarious, but we don't actually care about this. So I don't know why she keeps saying it.
Able to nail that down.
You still can't tell.
And in addition, consciousness, you can go in and out of consciousness.
Sure. So
And
here's
in
the-
addition, a child
Okay.
before developing consciousness only needs time.
Again, we're doing the not understanding what consciousness means, or we're using the two definitions of consciousness and two definitions of capacity here.
To
Sure.
develop that
So here's the
consciousness.
wait. This is
So
the most
you're-
important question.
One
The
thing,
most
one thing,
important
one thing,
question.
one thing. No, I'll let you make your point, but after you make your point, allow me to just come in, and I have
Okay.
a couple questions I need
Most
to ask.
important
Yeah.
question then. When
Well,
you
can
have
you
a
respond
person,
to what I said, though? I'm curious your thoughts on what I just said.
it,
Do you
I don't
disagree
even
with
know
what I
there's
said?
anything to respond to. There's something.
Do you agree with it? Disagree?
When you start saying things like you should take care of children, you can't pull away care from children. Obviously, I agree, but
Okay.
that's all begging the question. We all agree on that. The question is, when do they become children? So there's nothing.
No,
to respond
but what do you think about the distinction of I have the potential, I have the capacity for consciousness, I only need time for that to be realized. Similar, I'm under an anesthetic.
Yeah, she's using potential and capacity interchangeably, whereas Destiny will say they have two very distinct meanings, which he's using them as they do.
I can have the capacity
Okay.
for consciousness. It's not realized because I'm under anesthetic.
re-
In both cases, it's still wrong to kill.
There's a difference. You're
Why?
not developing the conscious.
Why does that difference matter, Destiny?
Because there's a difference between a thing
I
and
know
a thing.
there's a
something
difference, but why?
So the distance or the difference matters because, like, Destiny said it does. Like, this is an epistemic argument. He's saying, I think conscious life starts at, or life worth protecting starts at consciousness. Like, period. I think that because that's what I've decided. So this why question, like, this is a bad question. Not because, like, there's not a good answer to it, but just because, like, there isn't an answer. It's like I said why, like, why, because I said so. Like, you know, this is like his foundational belief.
Hold on, let him finish. Let him
Oh,
finish.
I am getting triggered. You're right. I'm getting triggered. Okay,
I know.
hold on.
We all know Destiny.
By
Okay,
what?
honey.
The arguments
floor
or
is
the
yours.
interruptions?
Because she knows her argument is bad, and that's why she won't let me finish her point.
Incorrect.
And it's triggering the fuck out of me. Okay.
Well, let's just let Destiny respond. Go ahead, Destiny. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So the key money question that I'm going to ask is if you have a person connected at end of life care, when does it become ethical to disconnect them?
You didn't answer. I'll answer that.
Lila's question.
But why does your difference matter?
Why does what difference matter?
The difference of the child.
You're not even going to let me
who-
finish, but I'll tell you the difference. The difference is there's a difference between a thing and a thing that something will become. Those are two fundamentally different things. So when you say, what's the difference between a fetus that hasn't developed the parts to have consciousness yet versus what's the difference
Excuse
between
me,
me?
the fetus-
I told you
Wait.
she wouldn't let me finish. Versus what's the difference
just
between
let
me
him finish,
who's currently
let him finish.
unconscious and will become conscious later after anesthesia will wake up. The difference is you're not developing the capacity to have consciousness. There's a continuation of a prior conscious experience. All the parts are there to create a conscious experience. They're just temporarily
Destiny,
temporarily
that's the fetus,
alleviated.
Destiny.
They're just no, it's not, because
Hold
the
on,
fetus
let
has
him finish,
never
let him
been
finish.
conscious and doesn't have the parts.
Yeah, so here the mistake he makes is he, like, does the same word game where, like, unknowing he's playing like their game where he's saying he's using consciousness like both ways, so it makes it really easy for them to attack his point. Because, like, again, there's a distinction between, like, are you awake versus asleep, like that type of consciousness, versus like are you, you know? So, like, what he's saying is the fetus isn't, but the person who's unconscious is. And then and what they're hearing is neither of them aren't. So I don't understand why you can kill one and not the other.
To deploy the conscious experience. So there's fundamentally a difference. Was that 2 or 3 interruptions that I said were going to happen, right? There's fundamentally a difference between a thing doesn't even have the capability to have a conscious experience versus somebody else's is temporarily abated by a drug. That is the difference.
Thank you for that.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Why
No
does the
problem.
continuation of consciousness matter?
The continuation matters because the thing I'm valuing is the underlying machinery that has the capacity to deploy a conscious
Why?
experience. Why? Because in all the intuition of when we talk about other people and
Intuition?
things, it seems like, well, ultimately that's kind of where our morals come from, don't they? Right? And at the end of the day, the thing that we seem to be valuing in other people seems to be the subjective experience that we're all having with each other.
Okay.
That seems to be the case.
Under your logic, Destiny,
Yes, tell me.
a newborn child whose
Yeah.
consciousness, their memories, they won't even have memories as a newborn.
Who's talking about memories?
Because
Hold on, just
your
let her finish.
consciousness as a newborn child and even your consciousness as a 1-year-old is very different than your consciousness as a Destiny, however old you are.
This is true. You could even argue that a newborn has less consciousness than an adult, but they don't have zero consciousness, right? Like, again, like what his argument is that, or like another framing of his argument is that consciousness exists on a gradient from 0 to 1. And, you know, a fetus at 20 weeks might be 0.00001, but that's more than 0. Therefore, we have to protect it. Like, that's what his argument is. Well, that's another way of phrasing his argument. So even if we just grant what's saying, yeah, like you could argue a newborn is less conscious than an adult, it's still conscious, period.
Okay.
Are you less of a human, less of a person, excuse me, because that's the word you're
Thank you.
using here.
Uh-huh.
Are you less of a person because you have less consciousness?
Yeah, you might be.
Okay, interesting. That's an
But just because
interesting
you're less of a
acknowledgement.
person
Yeah,
doesn't
that's probably
necessarily mean
true.
that you have like not that fundamental
So
right to be protected as a
If
life.
you are less of a person,
Just like a person who's prepubescent is less of a person in terms of like
Okay.
being like endowed with all the rights of society.
Sure, so
but
if
they
a-
still have the right to life,
okay,
to not be
so,
murdered.
so
yeah.
let's walk this forward. Then,
Okay.
if you're a 1-year-old
Slowly.
and you're a little bit less of a person than a 20-year-old, say,
Mm-hmm.
should you have less are your human rights less as a 1-year-old than your human rights as a 20-year-old? Where does that
Your
distinction
human rights
matter when
are
it comes
less
to
as a
rights?
1-year-old, yes. But in
Your
terms of like
human
right
rights.
to be killed,
Wait. Human rights are universal and inalienable for every.
Yeah. This is just a semantic disagreement. Like, what she's asking is, or this is semantic, like, yeah, like they're just not hearing each other. Like, what she's saying is, does, a 1-year-old, like, are they, like, is it more okay? Not that it is okay at all, but is it, like, less wrong to kill a 1-year-old than a 20-year-old? And then what Desi's responding with is, like, well, they have less rights, but, like, they have less legal rights. They don't have less, like, moral rights, right? Like, we would never say that some people might, right? We'd never say that, like, a 1-year-old is, like, less deserving of life than a 20-year-old. But, like, a 1-year-old has less ways to assert their rights than a 20-year-old. Of course they do, right?
Everyone. We're not talking about rights when you turn 18 to vote. We're talking about your universal inalienable rights. The idea of a human right is we all share them, and they can't be taken away from us.
Because we're human.
okay,
Maybe
but
we
you
should have defined that at
recognize
the
that there's a
beginning.
fundamentally different set of like rights for children than there are
Well,
for
I
adults.
think-
Now, if you want to talk about like right to not be killed, that's why
Well,
I keep
you-
clarifying. That's why I keep specifying. Right to not be killed. Yeah, I think
It's a
you have that
human
right to not
no?
be killed. Yeah,
It's
that is a human right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just to clarify, the amount of how much of a person you are, is what you just said, does not change your human rights, because my human rights as a 1-year-old, even though I'm less of a person because I'm less conscious than
Sure.
a 20-year-old, I still share the same human rights, no?
If you want to, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So why would you deprive a child in the womb weeks before developing this uncertain amount of consciousness that's still very limited compared to even the consciousness of a newborn? Why would you deprive them the right to life?
Because they haven't become a person yet, because they haven't developed that
But that's a
subjective
circular
experience at all.
argument. You
It's
just went back to this.
absolutely not
You went back
circular.
to the
Hold
same.
on. I'm
When
so
did
sorry.
a
Wait, wait.
fetus
To be
become a
clear,
person?
you're trying to say that, let's say that a person is 100.
You're saying
hold on, whoa.
consciousness
You're saying,
okay.
let's say a person is 50% a person at 1-year-old and 100% a person at 5 years old. And let's say you're saying that a second trimester baby is 20% a person. Well, what about somebody that's 0% a person? Well, I would say that's not a person yet.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they're saying, and he's right to point it out. That, like, you're upset that I don't value a fetus that doesn't have consciousness, because I acknowledge that there may be a gradient to consciousness, but, like, 0 is, like, the end of the gradient, at which point, like, it's specifically the end I don't care about.
It's very clear, very easy, very obvious.
You're basing that off of, though, development.
Yeah, the developing of a conscious experience.
So-
Just like
so-
death is based off
so
the development of the lack of a conscious
So that's
experience.
age discrimination. It's maturity discrimination.
If you want to call it age discrimination, you can call it what you want.
Okay.
You're trying to like
Okay.
dress it up to intuition.
You still
pump, like
didn't answer
other
my
things.
well,
question.
you're
from-
using intuition for your
Hold on,
argument.
no. When I say your
Interestingly.
intuition pumping, what I mean is you're trying to draw on all of the negative things of age discrimination
still
to make it
didn't
sound
answer-
bad.
Well,
But you're not
I think it is
addressing
very-
the fundamental point I'm making, which is that the conscious experience seems to be. And I'll go back to my one question: is when can we decide to
So-
pull the plug on somebody who's in the hospital? What is the defining factor for okay?
Tell me
we
more
can pull
about
the
this
plug.
person in the hospital.
Sure,
because-
they're in a coma. They're in a hospital. They're in a
Okay,
bed.
are they on life support?
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess, and they're not medically induced coma.
Correct.
Okay, so I would want to better understand, or did they just have a car
Okay,
accident?
talk to me. Yeah, they had a car accident.
Okay,
I
and
know
are
everything.
they brain dead?
They might be. Should we test for that? Do you think that's important?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is
that's very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you say
So-
brain dead, what do you mean by brain dead?
I mean, they can't detect any brain waves on the person. Are they flatlining? Is there any heart?
So, are we going to go by detection of brain waves? Is what we choose as
Because
the end of life?
because what you're getting to, it is ethical, I believe,
Okay.
to remove life support when there's no more hope for the person.
Do you think it's ethical to dismember the person when you remove the life support?
I mean, like,
Would
that
you
gets
do
into
anything
a
wrong
weird-
if you said,
I
I'm a
think that
sadistic
people
person
have,
who wants to
I think
dismember
that people have.
the difference, though, is
Hold on,
life
just-
support
just-
is an
just let him answer.
but-
Let him answer.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, I don't know why they keep interrupting him, but what Lila like walked into was like, let's say they are brain dead, but their heart is still beating. Well, why is it okay if they're brain dead? Seems like this consciousness thing like really matters here all of a sudden, right? So that's kind of like what he was saying in the beginning. Is like, I don't think you guys actually believe. I think you guys actually believe what I'm saying. Like this is like kind of the crux of the argument, which is if all of a sudden brain dead means you can pull the plug, well, why? And then Kristan just said something really stupid and I forgot because it annoyed me. Let me rewind a few seconds.
Brainwaves on the person. Are they flatlining? Is there any heart?
So are we going to go by detection of brainwaves is what we choose as the end of life?
Because what you're getting to, it is ethical, I believe,
Okay.
to remove life support when there's no more hope for the person.
Do you think it's ethical to dismember the person when you remove the life support?
I mean, like,
Would you do anything wrong if you said, I'm a sadistic person who wants to dismember people?
Have
the difference, though, is
Hold
life
on,
support is an
just let him answer. Let him
Okay, I remember. So, if it's not a person anymore, there's nothing like what Destiny should say. I think he was going to say that there's nothing like morally wrong. If you want to dismember a body after they're dead, like that's not okay. In the sense that like there's probably something wrong with the type of person that would want to do that, but it's not like a moral failing necessarily. It's like deviant behavior more than anything.
Let him answer the question, and then we'll have you go.
It's not a proper analogy is the problem.
It's such a good analogy because
You
what
enjoy
you're
it, I
getting
know,
at-
but it's not a proper one. For the child
It's
and the womb, it's not a
important because
proper
you're
one.
asking the very human questions I would expect you to ask, which are the questions everybody asks: is there brain activity?
Well, they're the ethical questions to ask when you're
Is
a
there-
medical personnel
is there-
making a decision
Sure.
about whether or not to remove
Yeah,
life
and
support.
we don't go
actually.
by heartbeat. We don't go by response to external stimuli. We don't go by
Those are often, yes, those are evaluated
They're-
when you're determining, making life and death decisions in a hospital.
brain death is usually what we're looking at. to
Yes,
figure
that
out.
is absolutely
That is
considered
the
as well.
defining aspect
Alright,
of when we consider somebody dead.
So hold
I-
on, can I just ask one question then? You are making an equivalence between a person on life support and a child in the womb, as if the child in the womb is on some form of life support.
The life
That
support's
is
not the important part.
that is not correct, though. That's not correct, because when I'm a child in the womb,
It
you
doesn't
when you're a
matter.
child in the womb, you're not on an extraordinary.
This doesn't matter. Like, I don't know why she's saying this. This doesn't matter.
Medical measure to keep you alive. You're in
Okay,
your
let's say they're
natural
not- let's say
habitat
that
where we
they're-
all
Yeah,
start
because
our
wait,
life.
look, can I get into this?
And the
Can I
only
get into this
let me just say
conversation
one
with
last thing, and I'd love to get in.
One more thing.
And the only thing that's going to kill you when you're in the womb, if not a miscarriage, would be an abortion.
Okay.
You may
So it doesn't match.
you still haven't answered the question about the 21-week and 6-day-old
I
human
said
being.
it's fine. You can do, yeah. They would be past my 20-week cutoff, so
it's-
they'd probably be treated like a child.
Probably. It's a
Yeah, assuming that's the
how?
law, it would be treated like a child. Yes.
So you're saying that the law is 20 weeks, and that is exactly where you're at.
yes.
He's been super clear on this. I don't know why she's being so smug.
Okay. What
Why-
about the child who's 18 weeks in the womb, who has spina bifida, and the
Gone.
doctors
Outta
get
here.
anesthetic to
Ejected
correct spina bifida
into
and
the
put the
atmosphere.
child back in the womb?
Oh, in the womb, if the parents want to, that's their choice. It's a medical procedure.
This is my question before
Okay.
you made your farting noise.
Yeah.
Does that child at 18 weeks, or the fetus, or the thing that you want to call it,
Yeah.
does that child have any rights?
No.
At all?
Nope.
But see, what's interesting is you're conflating parts with wholes.
Nope,
Because
I'm not.
No, yeah, you were. Because you keep saying that earlier, and we can rewind the tapes or whatever,
Okay.
that the child doesn't have the capacity for consciousness. But the child does actually have the capacity to have consciousness. At the moment of conception,
No.
excuse me. At the moment of conception,
Yeah, again, they're using capacity differently. She's using it to mean potential.
in
In which case, this is true, but he doesn't care about potential. Potential doesn't matter to him.
I told you I'm going to start treating you like a child.
Okay.
At the moment of conception, all of the parts are there, right? The genetic
No.
code is there.
That's not the parts. A blueprint is not a part.
Wait, can we
What?
pause?
Okay,
Sure.
so wait, let me finish my
Good pause.
I'm a child.
let me finish my question.
Yes, ma'am.
So what part gets added in the womb
Uh-huh.
at between 0
let's see.
days
There's
and
the
20
brain,
weeks?
there's
no,
the heart,
Excuse
there's
me.
the spine.
Where does that part come from, Destiny?
From the blueprints. Do you think blueprints to a car are the same thing as a car?
You just said it doesn't matter. I said the child
A
in the
blueprint
womb
isn't going to magically
has-
become a car.
Well, but a one
that's
cell
not- it's-
thing
it's-
is not a
it's
thing
not
with many
equivalent.
cells.
You,
not
you,
equivalent,
excuse me.
Destiny.
You're acting as if.
Wait,
Can you
Destiny.
sit up? Oh my
Yeah, can you-
gosh.
Destiny,
Let me
sit.
hear. I'll
If you're
treat
gonna treat me like a
Camera.
kid, I'm gonna act
Child
like a kid.
Destiny, please sit up and have good manners.
Treat me like an adult.
No.
Let's
we-
go back to
okay,
the coma.
hold
Let's
on,
go back
hold
to the
on,
coma.
hold on.
I think
Answer
I'm
my question about the parts and the holes, because I think
This is obviously ridiculous, but it makes me laugh, so it's fine. But don't do this if you're in a debate. This is bad.
this is really interesting.
Wait,
that
is this a birds of
you
the
Even if your opponents are this obstinate. Well, it's not even opponents. It's just opponent.
just said that the child at 20 weeks has the right to life, but the child at 18 weeks has zero rights.
That is correct. That was my cutoff.
Absolutely all.
Absolutely.
But what you were saying in your arguments with Lila earlier is that the child doesn't have the capacity for consciousness. And I said that's absolutely incorrect, because at the moment of conception, all of the genetic material needed for that child to obtain consciousness is there. All, and what Lila had already said very articulately, all the child needs is time to grow and time to develop. It's not as if a child in my womb at 12 weeks, I, take a needle and insert this like little part into my womb and say, bam, fetus, now you have the capacity for consciousness. No, all the parts are already there.
Sure. Let's say that I walk by.
Would you agree with me on that fact that all the parts are there?
Just one thing. Destiny, you respond.
Okay.
And then I do have to jump in. So Destiny, go, and then I'll go ahead.
If I walked outside and there was 100 steel beams and there was a ton of nails and all this shit laying on the ground and it was organized, and I walk over and I push over the steel beams, nobody would say, oh my God, you just destroyed a building. All the parts for the building are there. The blueprint might be there to build the building.
It would still be vandalism.
Yeah, but it's not a building.
It's
and I
part
agree
of a
that killing
building.
a fetus is killing a fetus, but it's not killing a human.
If I'm a home builder,
the argument here is not whether or not a thing is being terminated. We agree it's whether or not that thing is the thing you're claiming it is.
It's part of a building.
You're claiming that a thing has a blueprint or can develop the parts in the future or
I'm
has the
not
capacity
claiming
Hold on,
it.
let him
of a
finish.
thing.
Let
Science
Destiny
says
That
finish. Let
argument
Destiny
right there
finish.
betrays your whole point, because you're conceding that it is not the thing itself. If I walk by a construction site and I start knocking stuff over, I haven't destroyed a building. The pieces of a thing are not the thing itself.
I think that
When does
doesn't
the
hold-
fetus get the-
I'll
get
just
the
answer that
pieces?
really
When
quick.
it's conscious.
If you go in and start burning the building before it's built, that would be a problem, and it would be vandalism, and it would hurt the future
It would be
building.
vandalism, and it would hurt a future building, but it hasn't destroyed a building, has it?
It definitely destroyed what you were building, for sure.
Yes, but it didn't destroy a building, right?
Yeah, but this is the difference here.
No,
is
this is the whole
No,
subject of the
it's
debate.
not the
If
subject
you've
of the
destroyed
debate.
all the
Yeah.
materials for a building, have you destroyed a building?
A building is a
yeah.
thing. A human being is a person.
I think it doesn't match to what our conversation is
I think
on
it matches
a life,
perfectly.
because an embryo is a whole unique individual
Yeah,
human
and part-
life.
Let's come back to that. Let's come.
Yeah, this doesn't matter. Like, I'm really surprised she bit the bullet on that. But obviously, what he's saying is, like, parts, until they're assembled, are necessarily still parts and not the whole, right? Like, if I am assembling a car, or not even, if I have all the pieces for a car, like, you can say, and I destroy all the pieces individually. Like, you can say, I destroyed the car, but, like, you're not, like, that's not, like, semantically correct, right? And that's kind of, like, what he's, like, getting at. It's like, even if that's, like, emotionally, like, bro, why'd you break my car? It's like, well, no, I didn't break a car. I broke the wheels. I broke the frame. I broke the engine. Like, that's the fact that it's not just, like, if I break the engine in a car, like, did I break the whole car? No. And that's the point here. The fact that she bit the bullet on this and said, yeah, the parts are actually the whole, is interesting. Obviously, it's not true, but, cool.
Can we go to the coma back really quick? Because I actually want to address
thing.
that. Is
Well,
that okay?
let's
Or
come
no?
back to that
Okay.
in a little bit. We do have a couple chats to
Okay.
get through here. We're going to read through a couple of these chats. If you want, give a quick response, please, and then we'll continue on with the conversation. We
This
have
is the
about,
worst
I think,
moderator of all
10 or
time.
so different chats. Gred Neck, thank you for the 50. Appreciate it. I'm pro-life. First of all, woman, let the man speak. Damn it. Second, Destiny a hypothetical is something that is a scientific. You guys
Can
should
he-
probably spell check these before sending.
Can he not read? What's happening?
Things that are unrealistic, like a button saying not going to wake up, is unrealistic and impossible. Gredneck, thank you there for the donation. We have Stir the Sauce 09. Thank you, man. HR 1074, if the perpetrator commits the predicate offense with the intent to kill the unborn child, the punishment for that offense is the same as the punishment provided under federal law for intentionally killing or attempting to kill a human being. Explain?
Yeah, this is obviously stupid. This is just a law this is a law somewhere that says that abortion is the same as murder, which that's a law. This isn't a legal argument, it's a moral argument. So, like, that's obviously stupid.
By the way, if you want, you can read
Can
them
I-
on the screen here.
Can we go to the coma, or because it got?
Let's do a
Okay,
few
go on.
more.
Okay,
We
you
got a
go.
few
You
more.
got it.
Did anybody want to respond to Stir the Sauces? He's saying that
He's trying to make an argument from legality, but it's a dumb argument because nobody here believes in that. Because if the law right now said that killing a fetus incurred no penalty, obviously they would disagree with the law. If the law says that killing a fetus incurs a penalty of homicide, I would probably disagree with that law. But I mean, like,
Okay.
it's just none of us here are arguing
Sure.
for what's legal or not.
All right, next chat. We have Mickey. Hey, thank you for the $69 donation. Thank you. Take turns talking. It's the woman couple choice. Why is it anyone's business who is not going to raise and finance the child have a say? All that is needed to do is provide a safe space for them in order to prevent unnecessary casualty due to self-abortion. Can anybody parse that?
That's a stupid argument. People that say that it's just a decision between a man and a woman is dumb because what's being debated here is the life of a child. If you believe it's a child, then it's not just two people that have a say over it. The life of the child ought to be provided
Sure.
some personal negative rights as well. Yeah.
All right, we have Alvin
this is
Sam
true.
here. If
Basically, the guy is saying, it's whatever people are, it's whatever a couple decides, that's what they decide. And it's like, well, that's sort of true. But if it is a person worth protecting, then, like, should we allow a couple to just kill a person worth protecting? Probably not.
abortion is murder, should the woman be charged with that and go to jail? Credit to Rolla for this. Lila or Kristan, do you have a response to Alvin's chat here?
I believe that those who commit murder, so the abortionists, those who would be assisting in the abortion, could be tried with a crime. And actually, we've written laws at Students for Life Action that do make committing abortion a criminal offense. We do not believe that a woman should go to jail for abortion because sadly, for 50 years in our country, we have told women that it's not murder and it's not killing. It's simply removal of meaningless blobs of tissue that don't have any consciousness yet, which we know is.
Well, that doesn't matter. That's just stupid. Even if they don't think they're killing someone, if it is true that they are killing someone, they should probably just go to jail for that, right?
Is false. And so we actually see her very much as a second victim of the abortion industry that tells her that she can't, that she isn't capable enough, as you know, the argument that Destiny was making earlier, that women somehow aren't capable enough of walking around this earth pregnant without, being locked up or whatever to her potential.
Yeah, that's also like an insane thing to say. That like the woman is the second victim. It's like, even if that's the case, like I don't know. Like I'm sure that there might be laws somewhere. I don't know if like someone like hypothetically, if there was a person who was like a victim of abuse, so like now they have all kinds of mental problems, like they kill someone else, like they may get a lesser or like a different sentence, but like it doesn't mean what they did isn't wrong. Like they should still be punished in whatever capacity make sense for them, right? Like if she's a second victim, like if someone who's like severely traumatized and they just go on a killing spree because of what someone else did to them, should they just get off for free because they're a second victim? Like probably not, right? Like that's an insane argument.
Miscarriage. We believe that she absolutely has the capacity to achieve her career goals and her educational goals. But sadly, Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion vendor and the abortion lobby, has told her something different for the past 50 years.
Hold on, real quick. That's the worst answer ever. If you believe that abortion
Thank
is
you very
murder,
much.
then a woman should be held morally responsible for a conspiracy to commit murder if she goes to an abortion clinic. Full stop. End of discussion. If you think abortion is murder, a woman going to get an abortion would be the same as a woman going to get her 1-year-old child killed. If abortion is murder, it's murder for everybody involved, including the woman.
And I'm more of that position, which is that there's obviously, when it comes to homicide, there's a lot of potentially mitigating factors, full intent, full knowledge, coercion. But I think, yes, if you're willfully and intentionally taking the life of your child, there should be criminal penalties.
Got it. All right, we have Rams here with the Canadian 69.
That's a totally consistent answer, and I would expect her to say something like that. Like even in the case of incest or rape, like it doesn't matter. Just because something happened to you doesn't mean you get to just kill someone for free and it's fine.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Maybe we should take policy back to the age-old normal. To the age-old normal equals babies coming from marriage in society is the norm, and therefore out-of-marriage births will be the exception, and overall less births to consider for the mystery of when a fetus is a human. Okay, Rams, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Did anyone have a response to that? Or David Sina, can you each describe what happens during an abortion, starting with Destiny?
This question's kind of dumb and doesn't matter. This is supposed to be like the point of this question is like, oh, you don't even know what happens in an abortion, like, and you have an opinion on it. That's like that's the point of this.
I think it depends on where the development of the fetus is, but I think normally don't they start putting in tools, cutting it up, sucking it out? I think it depends on how far along the development is. So.
Would you like to go in detail? Because like if you like are advocating for abortion, I think you should be able to tell us what abortion really is.
My understanding is
Don't just be
prior
like,
to
"Oh, whatever."
Yeah, so I think generally there's like this whole slew of, I would call them like gore porn films, like Saw and stuff that they have doctors watching beforehand, so that when they go in, I think the goal is to inflict the maximum amount of gore and pain on the fetus before they take it out. So the first thing you do is you open the vagina up as much as possible, dilate the cervix.
Here, give
and
us
you
a
go
serious-
in,
give
and
us
the
a
goal
serious
is
answer
I
here.
think they start with little razors. It depends on how sensitive the baby is to pain, and they start to flay it alive in the womb, and then they pump like oxygen so the baby can start crying and everything. 'cause
Why don't you
hear
give a
the screams
serious
of pain.
answer to
No,
a serious
because
question?
the argument
Oh
of like
my
what happens on some
God.
emotional level, you're totally conceding any
It's not
logical point.
emotional,
it's
It
just
absolutely
the
you're
reality.
conceding because you're trying to win on some like emotionally driven
No,
point.
it's
If you
about
want to
the
morally
reality.
grandstand on it, it's fine. But I'm not here to like mince words over like, oh well, this is what happens.
This is obviously insane. It's super funny to me anyways. But yeah, like it doesn't matter what the process is. You don't even need to be, because again, the point it depends on the argument if the process matters. But Destiny's argument is an argument of consciousness. So if he thinks you should only get abortions for pre-conscious beings then or pre-conscious entities, then like it kind of doesn't matter what happens to it, right? If it's just a clump of organic matter, like you can do whatever you want to it. Like that's what his argument is. So if whatever you want is death by 1,000 cuts, then like cool, I guess. Like that's a little gruesome, but you know, you're not doing like anything more wrong than just, oh, let's just like remove it and, you know, inject it with something so it just never becomes conscious, right? Like obviously this answer is psychotic, but it like the point is to illustrate that like it doesn't matter because his argument doesn't care about what the process for abortion is.
Well, if you support abortion, I think you should have the balls.
I
to
support
at
cremation
least
as well,
tell
and cremation
you
would
what
be pretty
happens
bad
in
if
an
I thought that a
abortion.
corpse was a living
person's
person.
dead.
I also support embalming too, and that would also be really brutal
But
if it was
that's
a living
not a
person.
living human
Yeah, and I don't
being
agree that a
anymore.
fetus is a living human. Welcome to my
wait,
argument
okay,
from like
wait,
2 hours
see,
ago.
Destiny, are they
goes
dead?
back to the argument that we
If
keep
they're not
saying.
wait, hold on.
You
hold
keep
on.
saying
If
it's
they're not-
consciousness, but you
if
just
they're
said it's
living,
not
are
a
they-
living human
yeah.
being.
Are they dead, Destiny?
Is
It's
a
not a
fetus-
person. It's not
is
Here
a
we go.
fetus
person.
And now she's doing the semantic thing again.
in a womb
That's not
who's
what you
12
said, though.
weeks dead, or is it alive?
It's not a person.
Is it? Wait,
That's
you
not what
just
he said,
said.
though. He
You
said-
just said it wasn't a living human being. So answer
In the sense that
question.
it's not a person. You can try to trap me on semantics, but everybody in the audience knows what I'm saying.
But-
Your
but-
heart is living, but it's
I-
not a person. A
So
fetus
it's
is living, but it's not a
alive?
person.
Will
Yeah,
you
of
admit-
course it's something. Yeah, of course.
Well, I mean,
But you were saying abortion.
Mitosis occurs. There's metabolism happening.
Just-
It's getting external nutrients.
Just
yeah,
to
it's alive,
clarify,
it's not- yeah.
just to make sure I'm understanding,
Yes, ma'am.
you were saying that abortion isn't gory the way, or it doesn't matter that abortion is gory the way embalming or cremation might be, because it's not taking the life of a living person, something. Okay, you said human being.
Yeah, and she's like falling into what Kristen's doing, where like this looks like a sign of weakness when it's obviously just a misspeak. So Lila's kind of getting wrapped up in this, which is unfortunate because I think one-on-one they could have had a decently productive conversation.
Being, but then you change it to person because you realized
Yeah.
that was bad to say human being because you already agreed that humans start at fertilization. So, but abortion does end the life of something, no?
Yeah.
Does it?
It's terminate some process, metabolistic thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
so
does
it
abortion
ends life.
Yeah.
It
if
ends
you
life.
consider, yeah, it's a living thing. Yeah.
So is abortion killing?
A thing, something. Yeah.
What does abortion kill?
A fetus.
What is a fetus?
However you want to define it.
a
Something
fetus
that
a human?
contains a
There's no
human gene. It's
scientific
probably on the
definition of
total
fetus.
development of like a human. You start as a zygote, you begin mitosis, and you develop into a fetus, and there's different fetal
So a
stages
fetus
or
is
whatever.
a human.
Aren't you considered a fetus all the way up to like delivery? Technically,
Yeah.
It's like an
so
8-month-old.
so a fetus is a human.
Sure, it could be.
So it's
yeah.
correct, not emotionally, but it's correct
You're not- I'm-
literally
I'm
to
telling
say.
you, you're
I'm
not
just gonna
gonna win.
Just ask the question: is it correct literally to say then that abortion kills a human?
No, because you're intuition pumping. Because when you say human,
But
the
you
word you're
disagree with
trying
all
to
of
draw.
you.
Why is
If
she
you
incorrect in
disagree
that
to those
The
statement?
ultimate example of somebody not being confident in their position is to try to win the debate through etymology. You're not going to
No,
win this debate by
Destiny.
trying to redefine
You-
words in a
you-
clever
you
manner away
literally
from me.
just agreed
If you
that
want
it
to
was-
pretend that, that's
Yeah.
fine. But like,
That's
you're
it.
not making any actual like arguments here. What you're trying to say is like, well, do you consider a fetus a human? Sure. Do you consider a baby human? Yeah. Oh, so you want to protect some humans but not others? I guess.
I'm
So what
actually
about
trying
white
to
humans and black
understand-
humans?
I'm
right?
trying to
No, you're
understand
not
your
trying to understand.
position.
My point has been crystal clear the entire time. I'll restate it for like the 5th time. My point is the conscious experience,
seems like-
whatever you want to call that. If you want to call that when it becomes a human, and before that it's just a fetus. If you want to call that a person or give a person whatever, 20 to 24 weeks. At that 20-week mark is when you get the protections that you're endowed with as a human person under the Constitution of the United States. At 20 weeks. If you want to call the thing before a fetus or a human fetus or a human thing or whatever you want to call it, you can call it whatever you want.
So-
but my position is crystal clear. I've elucidated on it multiple times.
So
If you guys want to respond, go ahead, and then I'm going to get some
Okay.
more chats.
Does abortion
Just-
kill a human being?
a human being, I probably wouldn't agree to those terms, no.
Well,
but if you want me to say yes to make you feel better, sure.
So it's a little
I-
confusing.
Also,
You're
hold
like
on.
all over the map.
I'm
in
not
your
all over the
definition.
map. I'm crystal
we could
clear,
have
but
a
you're trying to
whiteboard
semantically
of
win on a
your
point instead of
circles
having the
you're
actual
drawing.
argument. However,
Yeah.
I'll say this. I can shortcut that whole question. The question is stupid, and their point of like saying like, well, look at how bloody it actually is stupid, because I can ask you this question and I don't know the answer. If there was a way to do an abortion on a fetus that was 100% humane, that was 100% pain-free, they just went in and sucked out and instantly deleted it, would you think that that's okay?
No.
No,
Absolutely
it doesn't
not.
change your argument
Because
at all.
still
So
it-
why
it's
bring up
still-
how gory or whatever,
it's
right? There's
still an
no bearing on
innocent
your argument
human-
whatsoever.
I'm answering your question. It's still an innocent human being.
Sure.
Where
I know. I agree.
the
I agree with everything you're saying. I
stronger
understand.
person.
But I'm just saying that, like, so the process of the abortion has nothing to do with the veracity of the argument. So the only reason you bring it up is to win
No,
emotional
actually
points.
think, I
That was the
actually
whole
think
point of my initial
it's,
point.
It's actually very important to the abortion argument because as someone
It's not important. Doesn't matter at all.
who's talked to women who've gone into abortion facilities or have been considering abortion, they are actually not fully consented as to what an abortion actually entails. And one of the big challenges that we face in the pro-life movement is actually educating Americans about what an abortion procedure really is. Is it simply a removal of a couple of cells? Is it like removing your appendix or a tooth? Or is it actively ending a human life that has unique genetic code?
To be fair, there is some merit to this in the sense that, like, I think less people would get abortions if they were like, yeah, so first you cut the baby's head off and then you suck out all of his organs and you grind its bones to dust. Like, if obviously, I don't think that's what happens. That would be a lot if that's what happens. But if that's what happened, I think less people would get abortions because that's a lot and that's pretty gruesome. But again, his argument doesn't really care about that because his argument says, well, it's just organic matter. So I don't really care what you do with it. If you want to take care of it, cool, don't get an abortion. If you don't want to take care of it, then you can just not do that, and that's fine too.
So
That's
this
a
is-
lie.
This is where it kind of falls apart, Destiny, in my view. And tell me where I'm wrong here.
Okay,
Chris,
gladly,
help
yeah.
me understand this. So
Help me fall
you
apart,
were
yeah.
we were talking about consciousness, and you were saying that consciousness, the reason that the development of consciousness matters for personhood, and you referenced moral intuition, okay? But you're very uncomfortable with the moral intuition that might also arise when you consider that abortion is the direct killing, dismemberment, poisoning of a preborn life, human. And so why are you uncomfortable with the moral intuition against killing an innocent preborn life?
Yeah, he's uncomfortable because they're making it sound like gunning down a toddler. Like, that's what they're making it sound like. Is, oh, killing an innocent human child. Like, sure, I guess, but like, when you phrase it like that, you're making it sound so much worse than it is. Like, or, than Destiny believes it is.
Life pre-consciousness, but you're comfortable with the moral intuition around consciousness.
Okay, just to clarify, it is innocent, right? Because you said it like 3 times. Hasn't committed any
Yeah,
crimes.
correct.
Okay, just making sure. Okay. I'm not uncomfortable with any intuitions.
That's good.
That's why I've answered every question, every hypothetical. We
Except
can talk
what
about-
happens during abortion. You didn't answer
You
that.
can,
Well, he was
you can talk about
uncomfortable
that if
with
you
it.
want.
You're
I gave my.
uncomfortable. You
I've
said you
known some
answered every
doctors-
question, but you
Well,
wouldn't
go
actually
for it.
answer the
I don't
question.
know the exact procedure. I described as much as I know about abortion. I'm sure you know every single gory detail. So why don't
Well,
you share
well,
with us?
I was simply
Wait,
going
I would
down
like to really hear about what happens during abortion.
we were going down a
Okay,
path
tell
where
me.
you said that abortion is killing, and yes, it's a human. But then I said, so you're okay with abortion, an act that kills a human, and you didn't like that. I think your moral intuition told you that doesn't sound right. Because
What doesn't
I think
sound right?
That you would support an act that kills an human. that
Yeah,
kills a
obviously.
human.
But
Yeah,
we're
but that's
talking
what an
about
abortion is,
different- but
Destiny.
we're
That's
not-
what an abortion
No,
is.
we're talking
but
about different types of
your
intuition
cognitive
here. Moral
dissonance is
intuition
raging
is
right now,
different.
Destiny. It's
It's
raging.
not.
This was a complete disaster. There's another section of this that I wanted to go over. Because like in the longer debate, there was one section that I wanted to scream and shout and let it all out. Where is it? Oh, here.
Or the
Yeah, the Terry Schiavo thing is stupid. Let's see. There was one hypothetical where maybe it's in here.
Abortion.
I would say no, because you're committing harm to a future person.
Whoa.
That's
See
wrong.
that even your definition of, well, I'm defining.
All right, hold on. Let's see if I can find it. What's Pascal's wager? What is it?
You know, I don't know. Wouldn't that be like the worst thing in the world to be wrong about? Probably more important than the abortion thing. Is who the big man in the
If
sky is.
someone- I
This is
guess-
why this is why I referenced earlier. It's called Pascal's wager. This is why it's stupid to thinking like, well, what if I'm wrong about this particular thing? Because you have to assign probabilities.
Because you don't, but what you're doing is you just like, you're
There's some considerations of, well, what are the impacts on humanity?
Maybe it's this
because
part. Hold on.
we could use these as
right.
breeding grounds and but let's say just within the confines of the abortion discussion, do you think an artificial womb could be a compromise between both sides, or would you be ignoring some of the potential downfalls of an artificial womb? Would you be in favor of?
Destiny shouldn't care about an artificial womb. They probably would, because all they care about is the thing dying, and the thing. Do they care about is the fetus dying, or being killed? And so an artificial womb would probably solve all of their issues, although they would probably have issues with like, the parent bonding or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a technology it's a very fascinating question, and I think that especially if there's like a problem with that the woman is experiencing and the baby is experiencing, and somehow it could be like a medical device to support them. You know, it sounds like it could be potentially used for good, but I think the potential of the use for bad and the fact that it's breaking the natural bond that
right.
baby deserves to have with his or her mother. This is why surrogacy is so problematic, because you're severing that child often from the genetic mother and from the gestational mother, and then usually the social mother is sometimes even a third different mother, and so the child has a right, I think, to their mother.
a child has a right to a mother, and so that's
to be
why we would
gestated naturally
say
in their mother.
That's why we would say that would be the number one goal, is that child has a relationship and is gestated within his or her mother. However, I asked this question a lot. I'm really glad you brought this up, because I asked this question.
This is actually decently reasonable. Like, growing up in your mother is like, at least if we're to believe what they're saying, seems to be pretty meaningful compared to like having a surrogate mother, compared to, you know, who is raising you. Like having all of those be the same person is probably pretty good. So like this is like a decent argument to like say, like, even if that was the case, it's still like bad for the child, but it'd still be preferable to the alternative. Now, I don't know if they would be wholesale against it, but like, it seems like they have their reservations for sure against artificial womb.
Question a lot on campuses, because often we hear the argument, we didn't get to it today because Stephen doesn't care about the bodily autonomy arguments, but we often hear the bodily autonomy arguments of, it's my body, I have the choice to decide whatever happens to my body, whether or not I want to give permission to this another human being to grow inside of me that will change my body.
Yeah, bodily
and someone's
autonomy
been
is
pregnant
stupid.
4 times, I can testify to that. So I actually do think that the artificial womb technology would actually, it will, when it is developed, will decimate the bodily autonomy argument, that you will not actually be able to use that argument to justify legal abortion any longer.
That's true. If you believe in the bodily autonomy argument, you don't have a great leg to stand on once the artificial womb is like real. I guess extremist bodily autonomy people could say, well, it grew inside of me, so I have ultimate say over what happens to it, but I don't know if any real people actually believe that. But yeah, the artificial womb pretty much eliminates any possible, eliminates any reasonable bodily autonomy argument.
When a woman simply can choose to take the child out from her womb and implant it into an artificial womb to grow, that way she doesn't have to pay someone to end the life of her child. Now, do I think that's the best situation? No, because a child deserves to have a relationship with his or her mother. And I think there'll be a lot of bad things that come out of children who are born in artificial wombs who don't know who their mothers are. And so there's a lot of other situations and societal questions we'll have about foster care and adoption and things like that.
This is a fair concern
But
to
I do
have.
think that will actually decimate this whole argument of the, quote, need for legal abortion in our country.
Sure. And I guess one question, and again, ignoring some of the, I suppose, societal impacts of if we were to introduce a artificial womb, because there's definitely considerations of if people started farming
That's right.
children, for
Gattaca.
example. But within the confines of the abortion argument, do you think that, because a woman could end the pregnancy, but the life could persist. So do you think that would be, if an artificial womb came along, do you think that would, in effect, put an end to the whole abortion debate?
I would think it would, but I asked Stephen this earlier about artificial womb, and he didn't. I mean, Stephen, you're representing the pro-abortion side here. Would you think that those who advocate for legal abortion would say? I still think they will argue no, and from the conversations I've had on campuses, which are in the thousands now, I've yet to have someone who agrees with me that the development of it, who's pro-choice, that the development of an artificial womb would eliminate the need for abortion, as in their words, because they would still.
Yeah. Again, this is probably just true. I think the majority of people, if you know, you're pregnant for whatever reason and you could just extract the baby and then put it in an artificial womb and it's not your problem anymore, assuming it was no strings attached, right? I think that would make it pretty hard to be pro-choice, or at least pro-abortion, rather.
Say that while that's still inconvenient to a mother to have to, I don't know, maybe the artificial womb only works at 13 weeks, so she would still have to undergo 12 weeks of possible morning sickness, and so they would say it doesn't matter if there's artificial wombs, she still has agency over her body, therefore she can just destroy it.
There's also a kind of a weird genetic ownership argument that emerges, even though this is not, I think, a fully conscious thing by a lot of pro-choice advocates, but there's this argument of, I don't want my kid out there in the world. You know, I want basically control over my kid. So I think in that case, it's sort of a property argument. They make this child as my property, and even if it can be survive in an artificial room, it's my right
I mean,
to
that's
end
what
the life of
happens
this
with
child.
people with.
Yeah. That argument is really hard to justify. I think it just feels wrong to agree to that because again, we could say the same with an already alive child, because you could argue that a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old is even more demanding on the mother's body, because maybe she has to work to take care of the child. So instead of maybe, you know, she was just chilling, you know, doing her own thing, not really working, and that's just fine. But now she has to work to, you know, care for this child on top of, you know, potentially breastfeeding it, or breastfeeding them rather. And it's damn, you could argue that, you know, a 1-year-old is even more taxing on a body than, you know, than a fetus. And even beyond that, depending on how obnoxious your kids are, you could argue that a teenager is even more demanding than a 1-year-old, who is even more demanding than a fetus. So the property argument about how I don't want my kid out there, that's super suspect in my opinion.
IVF with couples where they split up and they've already created human beings who are frozen in IVF clinics. There was a very famous case of a Hollywood actress who this was the situation, and Nick Loeb, the former partner, sued because he didn't want the mother to destroy these children that they had frozen. And the court ruled that the embryos were her property. These human beings were her property to do with what, as she saw fit. And that's, a broader question of why are we treating human beings as if they're our property, say, well, I don't want to get pregnant. This isn't the best time for me. I wasn't intending to get pregnant. This baby is inconvenient to me. Therefore, I have the right to kill it. We act as in our country as if human beings are, these children are our property. Yet then we also claim that we have a right to be a parent, and that right allows us to own other human beings, which is wrong.
Wait, how old are those embryos when they're frozen?
A few weeks.
Yeah.
A few weeks?
They're not very old.
You were in a burning hospital.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
there we
yes.
go.
Please give me the...
Yeah, and there are 2 children crying on the bed. Like, please carry me out. But next to them, there's a tray of 10 frozen embryos.
This is
They're
the
grabbing a
thing.
tray of frozen
Yeah.
embryos.
This is
answer
so
this
annoying.
question. Are those my frozen embryos?
They're random people's children.
So I think that
and they're random
actually,
embryos.
I actually think that makes a difference because...
Okay, well, I just told you it doesn't matter. So
No.
we can-
Actually, I'm saying I need to know more
need to obfuscate?
information.
I gave you all the information. It's 2 random babies.
Yeah.
They're very Asian. And then it's 10 frozen embryos. They're all also very Asian.
Why did
none
he
of
say
them-
they're Asian?
None of the babies.
Why
Neither
would you
the
say that?
Born
None of them.
toddlers
Yep.
or the frozen embryos
Yep.
are mine in this
Yep.
situation. Because I think first you have to ask that question. Because
I
some
already
people,
answered it.
Well, no, I would say some people when you would
Why
ask
are you
them,
obfuscating so hard?
Jeez.
Just answer the hypothetical.
would you?
Well, you're like arguing with you're like boxing demons, like shadows. You're like, well,
It's
some
a
people
loaded
make arguments. I'm not
question,
answering.
Steven. I'm trying to answer.
It's the same as
I'm trying to
saying,
answer
would
your
you
question.
press the red button
Yeah.
and kill 10,000 people over here, or would you press the red button and
save
kill your
one.
entire family over here? And you
The
had to pick
question
one,
is-
which would you
But I'm
pick?
not asking that question.
But it's the same question, Destiny.
But it's not the one I'm asking. You have no
Logically,
relation
it's
to any of the
same
children.
question.
Yeah.
I don't know. The question would be, I don't
Okay,
know.
let's
I don't
switch
know
the-
what
You don't know?
Okay. How about
I don't
this?
know what the situation is. I don't know. Can I reach those children? Can I reach those?
Okay,
embryos?
let me
I
give
think
you
the
the answer.
majority.
Okay, let me
Listen to
give
me.
you the
Can
situation.
you let me answer the question?
No, you're not
The majority
answering.
of people would say they would
I'm not
reach.
asking what the
The
majority- I don't even
majority
care
of
what
people
the
would
majority- I don't care what the
say
majority of people would say.
they're
I'm
going to
not-
reach for
I
the
don't- I'm not-
toddlers.
I'm not asking
But that
what the majority of
doesn't
people say.
saying that you
Hold
reach
on.
for the
I'm not-
toddlers.
I don't-
Can I answer the question?
You're not answering the question.
I absolutely.
I'll
majority.
answer
No,
really
Can I
quick.
answer my question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So the majority of people would say that they would reach for the human toddlers versus the human embryos because they recognize themselves in those toddlers. Those toddlers can also feel pain. Those toddlers are crying out to them versus the embryos who are absolutely silent. But that...
So this is a purely emotional argument, and not even that like she's arguing from emotion, but like what she's saying, like translated in like a logical format, is most people would make the wrong decision due to their emotions. Because technically, if you are of the pro-life belief and a life is a life, if you were like reasonably sure that 3 embryos would survive versus 2 toddlers, you're logically committed to taking the 3 embryo. And if you don't, something in your like internal system is like off. And that's like what the point of this hypothetical is. Like that's the point of asking this is to test, do they really believe this? And she just like self-reported and is like, well, I think most people would just make the wrong decision. Obviously she's not wording it like that, but that's what she's saying.
Analogy doesn't change the fact that a tragedy is unfolding and human life will be ended.
It's the same.
Yeah, no one cares about any of this.
Destiny, just to remove familiarity, because I mentioned
To
your
be clear,
family.
you did not answer
Hold
the
on,
question,
just,
but
to,
go
just to be clear,
ahead.
to,
Yep,
to
go
remove
ahead.
familiarity, because I know in one hand it's your family and it's 10,000 individuals on the other that you don't know. But let's make it a little different. Let's say it's 2 toddlers and 5 elderly people in their nursing home. There's 2 toddlers crying in the lobby. There's 5 elderly people in their beds. Who do you save?
Grabbing
If
the toddlers every
If
time.
you grab the toddlers,
I hate
though-
old people.
Right, but if you grab the toddlers, that doesn't mean you think it's good that the old people died. It
I
doesn't
do.
mean that you
I was
don't-
glad when COVID happened.
Come on, Destiny. It doesn't mean that you think old people don't have value. It doesn't mean that old people aren't persons. It just means that you're going to go towards the ones that you feel most emotionally in that moment connected and you feel you can save.
Gotcha.
Similarly with the burning building.
Technically, you could argue there's a logical answer here where you should still probably save the toddler just because the potential for life is like there's just more potential for like lived life. You could argue that the old people have like lived their lives already, and like if they're in an elderly home, like you could argue that they're just waiting to die anyways, so like it's not as bad to like leave them behind versus leaving the toddlers behind, where it's like they haven't even lived their life yet, and you know they're already born, right? So obviously they're conscious beings. So like you could argue that's like the correct answer here. I think this one's a little bit more ambiguous than like toddlers versus versus embryo, but I still think you should lean towards toddlers, generally speaking.
It doesn't mean that those embryos are gotcha,
Right.
they're not persons, gotcha, they're not humans. It's just that no, just like with the elderly people, I'm going
Yep.
to run and try to save those toddlers.
Okay, so let me.
it's
I'm
the-
going to
it's the
try
same
this again.
answer.
Okay.
And
babies.
just after
Yeah.
you respond, I do have to get through a couple chats.
Sure.
But go ahead, Destiny.
Okay, I would love to hear answers. Okay, 2 babies are right here. Okay, crying, help me. Okay, they're both 1-year-old. Okay, they can't run out of the building or anything. Okay, and then here is a tray. There's a tray of 10 perfectly in vitro fertilized, perfectly preserved specimens. You just pop them into a fake uterus or a real one. They'll grow into people, right? What's the morally correct choice? The 2 crying babies or the 10 perfectly preserved embryos?
There
If a life is a life, you have to take the 10 embryo. You have to.
isn't a morally correct choice in the sense that you are arguing that then if we choose the children, the toddlers, that somehow means the embryos don't have value. Well, of course we're going to choose the toddlers. They're just like I would choose the toddlers over the 5 elderly people in their beds. That doesn't mean the embryos or the elderly people aren't humans.
Okay, let's.
Yeah, that's like not the point. The point is you're just saying, yeah, I would still choose the toddlers, and then the question is why, right? If it's because of, you know, a more emotional connection, that's fine, but you also have to own that like you're making the wrong decision on purpose, knowing it's the wrong decision because of your emotionality, which again, just own that, right? Like there's nothing wrong with owning that.
Let's
Do you
say you had a
understand
choice
that?
You just have to
between
own
Do you
it.
understand that though? Do you understand our
I don't know. I'm
position?
trying to.
Also, if you own that, that doesn't mean that like the whole a life is a life thing, like probably isn't what you genuinely believe. Because again, if life is a life, like you have to take the embryo, like you have to, especially if like within the hypothetical, you know that you can just like put them in a person and they'll grow, right?
I don't understand. I'm asking another question. Let's see if it's.
But do you understand that-
I don't understand any of that. So I'm
What
asking a
don't you
question.
understand?
That's why I'm asking a
What
question.
don't you
okay?
understand?
I don't understand any of that. So I'm
What
asking a
don't you
question.
understand,
I'm going to
Destiny?
ask, and you can tell me.
Destiny, this is
say
not
you-
good faith.
you have to say what you don't understand.
This is
I'm
not
asking a
good-
question to elucidate. You
No,
can,
you're not
I don't understand the
explaining-
difference between the toddlers and the old people. That's what I'm asking. So
Okay,
let's say
you don't understand the difference between what?
between like why the toddlers and the old people matter. But that's what I'm
Okay,
going to ask another question.
can I
So let's
answer
say-
that
no,
question
No,
for
no,
you
no,
then?
because I can ask another question. It'll perfectly elucidate.
But hold on. Let's slow this process down because we go super fast here, which is fun.
We're
but
not going fast. It's a bunch of rambling without engaging with anything.
well,
No, we just keep going in
no,
circles over and over
We're going in
again
circles a
with
bit,
this
but
slippery slope.
the
That's what we-
reason.
To be clear, they're going in circles almost exclusively on the back of Kristan obfuscating. That's almost entirely why this debate's falling apart.
Keep
What I
going.
said, I would like a response to it, Destiny, is because in my statement, what I was explaining was that the elderly people in the nursing home or the elderly people in the building are humans, are persons, and me choosing to save the toddlers doesn't mean that those elderly people aren't humans, aren't persons, or don't deserve the right to life. Similarly, me choosing to save the toddlers doesn't mean that me not choosing to save the embryos means that they are not persons, not humans, and don't have the right to life. Does that make
So then the response is, that's fine. Why are you condemning them to death? And then she has to answer that.
sense to you? Or,
no,
or
that's
what
why I
doesn't
wanna
make
ask another
sense?
question.
Can you explain what
What doesn't
I-
make sense about that?
I don't. The age thing. Okay.
Oh,
So
why?
so,
Why?
Wait. So are you saying that the elderly people in the burning building in your scenario are more worthy of life than the toddlers because they've had more consciousness and lived experiences?
Well, let him say it. Let's
Is that your
not
argument?
put words in his mouth. What do you think,
Well, I'm
Destiny?
Oh
trying
my
to
God! You want to know what
address
I
it.
want to?
I want to know what you think.
Oh my
Seriously.
God. Okay, yeah, let me tell you.
Tell me.
The guess that most people probably, me included,
Yeah.
you'd probably be weighing like roughly amount of life left about, right? Like if we go on the hyper most extreme example, you can choose either a 1-day-old baby or somebody 1 day away from death. You'd probably save the 1-day-old baby because they've got so much more life to live.
But that doesn't
If you
negate
had to
that that
choose-
person's alive.
Hold on.
and has
One more.
value,
Let's
right?
fix. Hold on.
I thought that meant you could murder the old person.
Hold on. Let
Thank
me
you.
fix that. So let's
Yeah.
just to solve that problem for you. Let's say the 2 toddlers. You knew because you are a psychic or something. You know
I
you
am.
had this. You fortune teller. You knew that they would both die in 5 days.
Yeah.
would you still save them, or would you try to go in and save the 5 elderly people in their beds?
5 elderly people.
Okay.
No, you
well, then there you go.
probably have to save the elderly
You chose
people.
to make the decision. I probably still, even though if I knew in the back of my mind they're going to die in a car accident later and they're crying right there, I'd probably still grab them and
Emotionally.
I think it's
drag them
more-
out.
we're
Yeah,
not
so you'd
saying
make the wrong
morally it's more
decision.
correct
Yeah,
to
that's
save the
fine.
children that are going to die
I
in
think
5
in that
days than the
case,
older people you could wheel
I
out.
don't think you can
I don't
actually
think-
morally say whether or not children are going to die
Yeah.
in 5 days.
Well,
so you're
but
like
it might
making
be-
a lot
that's
of
why it's called a
assumptions.
hypothetical.
But I think the bottom line is,
Jesus Christ.
whoa, loud noise. I think
Got the
it
truck.
might,
Oh, he's got
Truck coming
the thing
through.
is he's got an air mattress upstairs, and I think his mom just jumped on the bed.
I think what I'm trying to say here is that in that
Wait, can I just
scenario-
ask my one question?
Well, we're getting to the bottom.
What's your-
We're not getting to the
Go
bottom.
ask
We
your
are getting to the
question.
bottom.
I'm so sick of
Destiny.
the same
Wait,
question.
let's-
Destiny
let's,
just likes to ask the questions to try to.
Here, let's
Well, no,
do.
because-
No, because he
wait.
doesn't actively answer.
Well, let's let him say.
every
Let's let him
question.
say. Let's let him say.
Order in the podcast studio. Let me do a couple chats here, and then we can, if you guys want to pick up again.
All
we
right.
can.
I'm
So
pretty
we
sure
have-
this just keeps being a disaster, so that's probably where I'm gonna stop this. But yeah, like this whole thing is like, again, not even like agreeing or disagreeing with anything that anyone's necessarily saying. The big issue that like Destiny kind of ran into is that they were playing like more. I think Lila genuinely wasn't like understanding what she was saying. Like I don't think she was like doing like weird like obfuscation or like playing dumb on purpose. I think Kristan wasn't trying to understand him, so he kind of fell into the trap of the word games where consciousness means two different things and we're like not distinguishing what that means. And then what's the other one? There was the potential and capacity. Capacity both means capacity and it means potential. So like that was something that needed to be cleared up. And then there were just like a few like misspeaks that he had that they like super latched onto, again almost exclusively on the back of Kristan. But ultimately, like I think a lot of like the shortcomings of this debate could have been diffused by just being super clear about the specific definitions of all the words that they're using. Because that's where a lot of the huge disagreements were, where like they never even really talked about like why what the other person believes is wrong. Like they never even really talked about that. Pretty much the entire conversation is, but this word means this and you said this and that's bad. And like it was really frustrating to listen to, but ultimately I think that's where like the vast majority of the disagreement was. So like, were we to run this debate back, like what I would do is just clear up the vocabulary. So like when we say consciousness, we mean specifically like, is this a person versus are you awake or not awake? Like I'm sure there's another word for it. Like let's just Google synonyms for consciousness, right? Like awareness, responsiveness, sense. Yeah. So like moving forward, instead of using the word like consciousness, what we could say is, you know, at 20 to 24 weeks, they become sentient. And then before that point, like, we just don't really care. That way, we kind of get away from the, well, if I'm asleep, can you shoot me in the head? It's like, well, probably not. But, like, that's because of consciousness rather than sentience. And then the same thing with the disagreement over, what was it? Capacity versus potential. Where, like, capacity is generally going to refer to what this thing, can do as is. Like capacity and potential are probably not even like the same word. They probably still get stuck there. But like the potential of a child is like it can grow into an adult and all that. But like the capacity is going to be a little bit different, right? It's like, well, what is this capable of now? And I think just making that distinction between what something is capable of now versus what they're capable of ad nauseum, or, you know, given an arbitrary amount of time, these are distinctions that would clear up the conversation. And then similarly, clearing up like human being versus, you know, child versus person, just using one word for each of this. Obviously, again, Kristan was being super dishonest this entire time and just looking for her own. So this conversation is probably gonna be a disaster, no matter what. But in a similar type of discussion, like separating, like, oh, okay, a pre-consciousness human is a human, and a post-conscious and a sentient human is a person, and what we care about is sentience, and that's what matters. But yeah, this was just a big disaster, and it's even harder to watch the second time through, I'm gonna be completely honest. But yeah, so I think that's where I'm gonna end it for today. This was fun to just go over and chat about. I'm gonna try to do one of these like once a week, not on like just Destiny or on these two, but just conversations I see and find interesting. I'm gonna try to do one of these once a week for now, and then, you know, depending on how that goes, we'll do more and more of them. But yeah, that's where I'm gonna wrap it up for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you later. Take it easy.